The King's Avatar audiobook by Kevin the King's Avatar Chapter 881. The first boss of their 20-player dungeon dropped 3 pieces of equipment, all either blue or purple. This was something even Happy didn't care about, let alone Tiny Herb. Even so, everyone still divided up the equipment with the method that they had agreed on, by necessity of classes. Then they found out that Lord Grimm had a right to all 3, rolling the dice for each. Wang Jixi had expected this sort of shamelessness from Ye Xiu, but his demands weren't completely unreasonable. Theoretically, unspecialized characters did need equipment from all classes, but there was no way Wang Jixi would just allow that sort of behavior. If it were all blue and purple, then he wouldn't mind, but orange equipment was useful for pro teams too. Lord Grimm's need for all-class equipment was just too much of a competitive advantage for him. Then what do you propose? Ye Xiu asked helplessly. Choose one class. Wang Jixi was always someone with ideas. Have you no shame? I'm a class that needs equipment across all the classes, and now you're as cruel as to ask me to give up on 23 of them, Ye Xiu retorted. It's only fair, otherwise you're too much of a bug, Wang Jixi replied. No way can I accept that, Ye Xiu declared. Just one class at most 2, Wang Jixi made a small compromise. Just tell me what your limit is. Ye Xiu expressed that he refused to bargain with Wang Jixi over this any longer. That is my limit, Wang Jixi responded. 4 class types, Ye Xiu suggested. Not possible, Wang Jixi rejected decisively. 4 class types was 16 out of the 24 classes. As the 2 gods argued, the members of the teams exchanged helpless glances. 2 gods at the peak of glory argue over dungeon drops. This might have a chance at becoming the headlines of esports home if they knew what was happening. Fine. In the end, it was Ye Xiu who made the biggest compromise. But at least 3 classes. Going from wanting all 24 classes to 3 was a huge compromise. Wang Jixi didn't fixate on his 2-class limit and also compromised, agreeing. The Tiny Herb members all believed that their captain had won this debate, cheering. Which 3 classes do you want? Wang Jixi didn't hesitate to make the negotiations completely clear. Battle Mage, Ghostblade, and Cleric. Ye Xiu didn't hesitate either, giving an answer that was obviously planned ahead for. Wang Jixi paused for a moment, but understood Ye Xiu's reasoning after looking over the class lineups for each of their teams. Tiny Herb and Happy had 3 overlapping classes, which were none other than Ye Xiu's requested Battle Mage, Ghostblade, and Cleric. That meant the equipment they would come into competition over would all be for these 3 classes. Now that Ye Xiu had set his Lord Grimm to these 3 classes as well, he had increased the chances of Happy's victory in the competition over those specific pieces of equipment. It was too late for Wang Jixi to regret his decisions by now. With the negotiations over, Ye Xiu then pulled up the DPS chart to comment. Tiny Herb's members did very well. Everyone has to look towards them as examples. Ye Xiu sent the DPS charts into the chat. The highest rank was Wang Jixi's Vacaria, and after that was a column of Tiny Herb members. With more refined teamwork and synchronization, Tiny Herb's DPS was miles ahead of Happy in the boss fight. Apart from the 2 clerics, the worst DSer was Deception. This time, he hadn't even done any better than Chen Guo's Chasing Haze or Luo Jai's Concealed Light, and had been left in the dust. For one, he had frozen for a long time in the middle of the match. Afterwards, he had only occasionally jumped in to grab openings. He hadn't gone with the flow and his attacks weren't continuous. It would be weird if his DPS was high. A certain someone needs to work really hard. Ye Xiu lamented aloud. Mo Fan's emotions were tumultuous. After setting his resolve to improve his DPS again and again, only to do continuously worse, even worse than Chasing Haze and Concealed Light, Mo Fan was unable to raise his head. However, Tiny Herb's members were much more professional than normal players. They didn't mock and disdain someone with such a terrible DPS and continued on without any comments. Their attitude didn't cheer Mo Fan up at all. The reason no one commented was because no one cared. Mo Fan might like being on his own, but he didn't enjoy being ignored like this. I already know what to do. I'll show all of you when we get to the second boss. Mo Fan's thoughts were so, but they were too naive. For the second boss, Mo Fan's deception continued to jump in and out to deal damage, using the same method he was familiar with and thought to be right. Without fighting as a part of the team, what achievements could he obtain? After the second boss had been taken down, he was still the last on the DPS charts, worse than chasing haze and concealed light. How is this still possible? The silent Mo Fan couldn't help but yell. What a clueless guy, Tiny Herb's members thought to themselves. With your method, having such a low DPS was only expected. With such results, Mo Fan naturally realized that the way he had been playing was still incorrect. He still didn't actively seek help, stopping to observe during the third boss. Everyone ignored him again. Tiny Herb continued their perfect DPS while Ye Xiu continued to give everyone a role. A perfect symphony, just waiting for Mo Fan to become an appropriate tune to harmonize with them, instead of jumping in with a bang and running straight back out. Deception didn't act at all during the third boss fight, reducing his DPS to a 0, ranking him at the very bottom of the list, even lower than the clerics. When clerics were bored, they might throw out a damaging skill, putting them above deception. No one knew if this guy had made any discoveries. They had finally progressed to boss number 4. With the powerful team Tiny Herb as their allies, their progress was even smoother than it had been in the easier 10-player dungeons. From the DPS charts, it was evident that Tiny Herb was the group holding down the fort, far above Happy in both healing and DPS. Happy's members didn't really care too much about how fast they were progressing anymore, having guessed Ye Xiu's motive and were waiting to see when Mo Fan would be fully enlightened. The fourth boss fight started. This time, Deception didn't just spectate, standing with Happy's attack team from the start. Ye Xiu began to lead and Happy's battle system grinded into action. Mo Fan also quickly found the place left open for Deception and finally didn't desynchronize. He was in the middle, working with the system. Ye Xiu was elated. Mo Fan might have some problems with the way he was cooperating, but at least he finally understood what they were trying to do now. Should he speak up to bring him under command? Ye Xiu was hesitant. In truth, when he and Mo Fan first met, they had fought side by side. Back then, Ye Xiu had taken command and their teamwork wasn't bad at all. However, it was different today. When the two first met, they had no bones to pick. And now, Mo Fan had only come to Happy after having been harried to the point where he couldn't even play the game properly anymore. There was bad blood between them now. That was why Ye Xiu didn't order this guy around. He could guess that if he said east, that guy would probably go west on purpose. So Ye Xiu had decided to silently guide him from afar, hoping that Mo Fan would become interested of his own violation and figure out where his problems lay, adjusting these areas accordingly. Now Mo Fan had finally taken a huge step. If he could accept being ordered around by Ye Xiu, then everything would be that much easier. However, Ye Xiu was afraid that if he spoke, it would only have the opposite effect. So he decided to keep using the same method, not saying a word, and just creating openings for Mo Fan to take by himself, learn by himself. Everyone watched his performance and knew that he was working hard, struggling through figuring out what he should do without any pointers. The Tiny Herb members who didn't understand the situation started to become a little sympathetic towards Mo Fan, inwardly thinking that God Ye Xiu was too cruel. He didn't give him any guidance at all. There had to be a limit to how strict you were, right? The fight with the fourth boss was like fighting through disaster for Mo Fan. When the fourth boss fell, he felt like a mess. His mind was on the verge of blanking, forgetting everything he had done. He only had one feeling. He was chasing after a speeding train, wanting to crawl onto it, but was always getting thrown off. How pitiful he had been was easy to imagine. When the results for the fourth boss came out, Mo Fan's score was still bad, still last. However, while he might have not improved in rankings, but everyone could see his improvement in data. Fighting to follow the rhythm, his DPS had a great improvement compared to before, when he only darted in for a single blow when an opening revealed itself. Tiny Herb's members were on the precipice of giving him a round of applause, yet all Ye Xiu said was keep it up, everyone. There were also 5 bosses in 20-player dungeons. The two teams cooperated, taking the first kills as they went, and finally arrived at the last section. By then, everyone had forgotten their original intentions and focused on Mo Fan's deception instead. After opening fire on the last boss, the members of Tiny Herb kept throwing glances at Happy's side every now and then. Deception was stubbornly trying to synchronize with the pace of the team. For him, who had never been taught or tried to learn such a thing, it was a tough job. The other members of Happy had, in fact, practiced cooperation in their daily trainings. They couldn't compare to Tiny Herb, but they weren't some rogues either. Mo Fan had set an impossible task for himself, learning to run before he learned how to walk, and he was figuring it out himself too. Yet, everyone could tell Deception had definitely improved since the last boss. This guy, he had taught himself. The King's Avatar Chapter 882, the final boss was more powerful than the previous 4 bosses, but facing these formidable players, it wasn't anything to look at. Everyone was paying more attention to Deception's transformation than the boss. In the end, the boss was mowed down. Boss first kill, dungeon first clear, both system announcements were released. It was the 5th and 6th time these eye-catching names were displayed to the world. The players were all looking at each other cluelessly. Ye Xiu, Wang Jixi. If those two people were truly the ones playing on those characters, this first clear record was just too beautiful. Who were these two? Since the start of the Glory Pro League to now, of the 8 championships, these two had won a combined total of 5 of them. And now, these two had actually teamed up together to clear a dungeon. This first clear record felt like a historic moment for them. All of the players witnessing these names listed out felt like they were a part of this history. But the players creating history didn't think much of the record. After the boss fell, they checked the DPS charts immediately. Deception was currently the star of the show. Everyone's eyes were on him. In terms of placing, Deception was still at the back of the pack, but in comparison to the previous boss, his DPS had clearly improved. The self-taught genius Mo Fan was improving at lightning speed. Mo Fan wasn't in a hurry to chase after a higher ranking. When he checked the DPS charts, he felt very pleased at the improvement. He wanted to hurry up and start another dungeon so he could continue to practice, but these guys were now dilly-dallying, receiving the first kill and first clear rewards. Mo Fan was feeling impatient. First kill and first clear rewards. These were what the two sides valued the most. Let's confirm the distribution plan again. Wang Jixi's attitude seemed as if he were playing fighting Ye Xiu in a match. Distribution will be according to each other's needs, Ye Xiu said. Materials will be split 50-50, Wang Jixi added. Unspecialized needs everything, Ye Xiu said. I'm just joking. I only need Battle Mage, Ghostblade, and Cleric class equipment. Ye Xiu said. You've promised, Wang Jixi said. Why do I feel that you don't trust me? Ye Xiu asked. Because I'm used to treating you as an opponent and not a teammate, Wang Jixi said. Afterwards, the first kill and first clear rewards were received. The amount of rewards given for a 20-player dungeon would certainly be more numerous than that of a 10-player dungeon. Before, the rewards had to be split between 10 players, but with 20 players, 10 more players needed to be accounted for. The first boss first kill gave them 2 pieces of orange equipment. Everyone hastily checked the stats to see which class it was most suited for. We neglected 1 point. Wang Jixi suddenly spoke up. Chem, if none of us need the equipment, is everyone going to roll or just one representative from each team? Wang Jixi said. Or maybe we just give it to the unspecialized who needs everything, Ye Xiu said. Let's just have representatives from both sides roll for it. Wang Jixi completely ignored Ye Xiu. Instead of picking someone from Tiny Herb to roll, he just took it on himself and rolled. A beautiful 99. Fine, then let's start rolling. Who's going to go on your side? Ye Xiu returned the favor by ignoring Wang Jixi. Tiny Herb's side booed. Ye Xiu could even hear some boos from Happy's side. I've already rolled a 99, Wang Jixi said. You're forcing us to roll a 100, Ye Xiu said. Go ahead, Wang Jixi said. I'll show you the might of our boss. Ye Xiu said and indicated for Chen Guo to step forward. Chen Guo trembled with fear. Oftentimes, she couldn't change her fan mentality. When she saw that her opponent was God Wang Jixi, she couldn't help but panic. Chasing Haze rolled a 42, a crushing defeat. Vacaria took one of the 2 pieces of orange equipment. Loser first, Ye Xiu shouted. Chen Guo stared blankly. It means you roll first. Ye Xiu could only explain. As a result, Chasing Haze rolled again. Her roll was even more tragic than her previous one. 25. There was only a 25% chance of her winning. Chen Guo wanted to cry. I don't want to roll anymore, someone else. Don't panic, there are 2 types of victories. One where you're better and the other where your opponent is worse. See? Ye Xiu wasn't even able to complete his sentence. Wang Jixi's Vacaria had already rolled. It wasn't too high, a 61, but it was enough to bully a 25. This isn't scientific. Ye Xiu stirred. You're cheating. Boo, you're a god. Bickering over a roll is too shameful. Team Tiny Herb took both pieces of orange equipment. However, the 2 items that needed to be rolled for by both sides were equipment that neither of them needed. For the second's boss, there were 2 more pieces of orange equipment. This time, they didn't need to be rolled. One was suitable for blade masters, so Tiny Herb's Liu Xiaobi took it for his flying sword. The other was suitable for brawlers. Happy's side took it for steamed bun invasion. The difference was that on Happy's side, steamed bun invasion directly took it, while Captain Wang Jixi's Vacaria took it for his team. For the third boss, a battle arose for a piece of cleric equipment. I'll go. This time, Wang Jixi wasn't fast enough. Their team's cleric Yuan Boking went out to battle. His character auto-rolled, 82, a high chance of victory. Ha ha. Yuan Boking's laugh carried a hint of provocation. Little hands, you're up, Ye Xiu called. And Wenny's little cold hands rolled a 75. Loss. Tisk, the pressure's on. On Happy's side, Ye Xiu's Lord Grim also had an opportunity to roll, so he clicked his tongue. Hurry up, Yuan Boking said. Go die, Ye Xiu shouted. Lord Grim rolled, 83. Ha 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 ha, this is what you call real skill. Ye Xiu laughed. Yuan Boking was furious. He wasn't angry about losing an orange equipment, but losing to Ye Xiu was irritating, especially since it was only by 1 point. Nothing could be more infuriating. Little Colds, you take it. A healer's cloak was handed to Little Cold Hands. The other piece of equipment wasn't needed by either side. Let's go, Ye Xiu said and rolled this time. An invincible 100. Who's the best? Ye Xiu asked and dropped it into his inventory. How do you know that none of us can roll a 100? Yuan Boking shouted. If a roll was a tie, it wasn't who went first wins or anything. It would be a re-roll. Then you roll. Ye Xiu said to Yuan Boking. Yuan Boking didn't move. A 99% chance of losing was truly too high. At this moment, God Wang Jixi was calm. He rolled a mediocre 51 and ignored it. The fourth boss didn't need to be rolled for. There were 6 materials because they didn't know the usage of these materials. There was no point discussing who needed what. As a result, each side randomly grabbed 3 materials. For the final boss, each side had equipment that was needed. Tiny Herb's Knight Angelica took one. The other was launcher equipment. Happy had two launchers, so they obviously took it. The distribution for the first kill rewards for the 5 bosses were now complete. There were no weapons. Chen Guo expressed her disappointment. Then the most important part came, the first clear rewards. Receive 4 pieces of orange equipment, 10 materials. Sure enough, the first clear rewards were worth 3 times as much as first kill rewards. The materials were easy to split. Each side randomly took 5. When everyone checked the stats for the equipment, everyone was stunned. Among the 4 pieces of equipment, 2 were suitable for ninjas. There was even a weapon, Ninja Kukri, level 75 Ninjato. Weight, 3 kg durability, 23 attack speed, 8 physical attack, 769 magic attack, 767 strength plus 36 intelligence plus 36 back attack plus 30% seal ninjutsu critical strike chance plus 12% attack speed plus 2 underground tunneling technique level plus 2. When an attack strikes, there is a 5% chance of inducing a dizzy to the target lasting 4 seconds. There weren't any abnormal stats. It was a steady improvement over a level 75 orange weapon. Apart from this ninjato, there was also a cloth belt. The 2 pieces of equipment were given to Deception without contest. Everyone was thinking that perhaps the system had taken pity on this guy, so it gave him 2 pieces of equipment. Apart from these 2 pieces of equipment, it was another role war. In the end, each side won once and each took 1. Now the 20-player dungeon, Rebel Army Vanguard Camp, was completed. From a rewards perspective, to only see 1 weapon out of all the first kill and first clear rewards was quite unsatisfactory. There wasn't just one 20-player dungeon. In the end, Ye Xiu asked if everyone wanted to continue. Mo Fan definitely wanted to, but he quietly waited. As for the others, everyone was a bit tired after staying up all night, but when they thought about all of the first kill rewards that were waiting, if they slept, the rewards would mostly be gone by the time they woke up. The pro players were active right now. When Happy and Tiny Herb took down the 20-player dungeon first clear, Tyrannical Ambition had snatched the final 10-player dungeon. The 5-player dungeon first clears were being competed for by the various club guilds. All of the names on those records were undoubtedly pro characters. Let's keep going. Seeing that everyone was still full of spirit, Ye Xiu spoke out. "Oh, you guys aren't going to take a break after staying up all night," Wang Jixi said. "You could tell we've been up all night," Ye Xiu said. "The record board is filled with your names," Wang Jixi said. "As expected, it couldn't be hidden from you," Ye Xiu sighed. "Another round of booze. That wasn't anything hard. As expected," a sigh. "Then let's find another 20-player dungeon to run," Ye Xiu said. "This time, getting a first clear might be a lot more difficult," Wang Jixi said. "Oh, take a look at the chat group," Wang Jixi said. Ye Xiu immediately checked the pro player chat group. Following his method of forming groups, there were all sorts of messages asking people to press 1 to join their group. From the chat record, several 20-player groups had already been formed. They were probably in the middle of dungeons at this point. Everyone here was a pro player. In-game challenges were a walk in the park for them, so the clear speed between them wouldn't be too far off. For a dungeon, speed records, which were a race against time, might be more intense, but for first clears, they were off by several minutes, so there wasn't much room for competition. By the time they got to the entrance of the dungeon, the other side's first kill record would probably be announced. The King's Avatar Chapter 883. It was rare for the pro player chat group to be so lively. Usually during the season, at least half of the pro players every week weren't in a good enough mood because of their match outcomes. But right now, their conflicts were entirely in the game. For pro players, first kill and first clear records weren't anything too important. Their main purpose was to familiarize themselves with the new update, so apart from those in the chat group forming parties together, there were also many game-related discussions going on as well. If one didn't know these were Glory Pro players, the chat group appeared like a normal chat group. "Have all of the 20-player dungeons been taken?" Ye Xiu charged out and asked. "It seems like it," someone replied. "Has anyone formed a 50-player group?" Ye Xiu called out. All of a sudden, countless people sent out blood-spurting emojis. "You old man, you're beyond shameless. You want to run a 50-player dungeon. Afterwards, are you planning on running a 100-player dungeon?" This time, his call didn't receive a reply. After all, a 50-player dungeon wasn't like a 20-player dungeon. For a 20-player dungeon, only 2 teams were needed to run it, but for a 50-player dungeon, 5 teams would need to coordinate. Which team wasn't busy right now? Don't look at how there were people constantly chatting in the chat group. That didn't mean they had nothing to do. It was just a dungeon after all. For pro players, how hard could it be? Dungeoning while chatting in QQ was no different from releasing extra energy. 50-player dungeon were receiving early bookings. Anyone. Ye Xiu had guessed that no team was idle at the moment, so he left everyone some leeway. There was still no reply. Ye Xiu was helpless. He returned to the game and saw that Team Tiny Herb was still there. "No one wants to join," Ye Xiu said in the game. "You actually wanted to run a 50-player dungeon," Wang Jixi said. Ye Xiu's noisiness hadn't only been seen by him. Quite a few Team Tiny Herb players in the chat group had seen it too. "If we can, why not, but it looks like we won't be able to," Ye Xiu said helplessly. "If we find people from our guilds, beating the dungeon would be too difficult," Wang Jixi said. "Yeah." Ye Xiu agreed. For dungeons, the more players required, the harder it was, even more so with a 5-level suppression. The difference between pro players and normal players was day and night. Even with a god commanding them, normal players might not be able to keep up with the pace. Bringing them to challenge these dungeons right now was too unrealistic. "It looks like you're not interested in running dungeons without any first kills," Wang Jixi said. "Yeah." Ye Xiu nodded his head. In reality, he didn't care so much about the record itself, but rather the rewards they would receive for the records. For a poor team like Happy, the update was an opportunity. Even for the pro team powerhouses, despite having an enormous advantage over Team Happy in terms of materials, upgrading silver equipment wasn't something that could be completed in a short amount of time. Gathering and studying these new materials from the update would require a non-trivial period of time. During this period of time, if Happy could obtain large amounts of level 75 orange equipment, in terms of equipment, they could greatly close the gap between themselves and the other pro teams. During this period of time, pro teams might continue using their level 70 silver equipment or use exceptional level 75 orange equipment. In terms of basic stats, everyone was on the same playing field. The only advantage level 70 silver equipment might have was that they fit the player better. Compared to Happy, who had level 75 orange equipment now, the disparity was minute. As a result, Ye Xiu hoped to obtain as many level 75 orange equipment as possible because Happy wasn't like other pro teams with a powerful guild, even in comparison to those low mid-tier teams. So although the drop rate for orange equipment was very low, with such large guilds in the Fan Foundation, their ability to obtain orange equipment was far higher than Happy's. As for Happy, their guild had only just started. Wu Chen had brought with him Guild Everlasting, but Guild Everlasting had been in relegations for 2 years and had taken a blow for being under Happy's umbrella now. They were in a half-dead, half-alive condition, so their strength was very weak at the moment. Under these conditions, Ye Xiu couldn't avoid being petty and intentionally aimed for those first kill rewards, because Happy didn't have the qualifications to be as imposing as those pro teams. By relying on these first kill rewards, The profits from their hard work weren't small. In the entire glory, they undoubtedly had the most level 75 orange equipment at the moment. However, there was still quite some distance before they could fully equip the entire team. It also seemed like their stable method of obtaining orange equipment through first kill rewards no longer existed. Ye Xiu couldn't help but feel rather sorry. Wang Jixi was a team captain. He thought about issues the same way that Ye Xiu did. With Happy's situation, it wasn't hard to guess Ye Xiu's thoughts. He smiled at this moment. How about we swap pointers? We can add stakes to it. Ha ha ha. Ye Xiu gave a hollow laugh. Lord Grimm turned to Happy's members. Disband, sleep. What? You're scared? Team Tiny Herb's Yuan Boking might be a cleric, but his personality was quite hot-blooded. He shouted out provocatively. We're not scared. Ye Xiu smiled. I just feel like if it comes to facing you guys, just me is enough. There's no need to trouble everyone. That's true, Wang Jixi laughed. After saying that, Vacaria turned to say to everyone, disband. Just me alone is also enough. Ha ha ha. Everyone in Tiny Herb laughed. Yuan Boking added, we won't fight, but we won't disperse either. Staying here to watch is fine, right? Yuan Boking, how arrogant. I've put up with you long enough. Do you dare to 1v1 me? Ye Xiu picked out his name. FCK, you're picking a fight with a healer, so you can even do that, Yuan Boking shouted. I'll permit you to pick any class you'd like. Ye Xiu said. Why don't you go to the side to cool off? Yuan Boking said. As a pro player, he could play other classes too, perhaps even better than most normal players, but facing another pro player, switching to a class that he didn't main was looking for death. To be more fair, I won't use my main and unspecialized. I'll pick another class too, like let's say a battle mage. There's no room for argument there, right? Ye Xiu said. UFC cur. Apart from cursing, Yuan Boking indeed couldn't refute. Ha ha, if don't dare, that's fine with me. Ye Xiu said. Yuan Boking wanted to cry. What could he say? If he said he dared to, wasn't that looking for death? If he said he didn't dare to, that mother seeker, it had nothing to do with whether he dared to or not. How did the subject get so twisted to such a point? Why not swap pointers with me? In the end, God Wang Jixi was the most calm. He easily pulled the topic back. With you? I've fought against you who knows how many times. It's too boring. I'll go to sleep, Ye Xiu said. More like you're scared. Yuan Boking jumped out to call out, but then he stared blankly. FCK, instant retreat, Tiny Herb's Liu Ziobi said stupidly. Right after Ye Xiu finished his sentence, Lord Grimm immediately disappeared. He decisively logged off without any hesitation. The others on Happy hadn't even dispersed yet. Sleep. Ye Xiu stretched. He stood up and moved around a bit. Everyone in the room was looking at him as if they couldn't look at him straight. In the end, it was Mo Fan, the person who spoke the least, that glared at Ye Xiu with a face full of disdain. Despicable, shameless. Ye Xiu glanced at him and replied with 2 words. Leecher, deadweight. Mo Fan's face instantly turned blue and black. He really wanted to retort, but he had no choice but accept it. In the dungeon, his DPS had truly been a mess. Everyone, don't sleep too late, Ye Xiu called out to everyone. Sigh, there are no more records to get. What a pity, Chen Guo sighed. Our harvest today was already quite good, Ye Xiu said. That's true. Chen Guo nodded her head. If she weren't with this group, she would never have imagined such earnings. Not long ago, she was just a normal glory player, but now, she had a bunch of records under her name and had fought together with the best pro players. For an ordinary player, this type of experience could only be dreamt about. Chen Guo sat at her seat and stared in a daze up until Tang Ru was about to leave and called out to her, You're still not going to sleep? Oh, I'm going. Chen Guo immediately got up too. Little Tang, our team is amazing, Chen Guo suddenly said. Tang Ru was surprised. She then smiled. It'll be even more amazing later. Yes, it definitely will be. Chen Guo smiled. She went back to her room with Tang Ru, but she didn't sleep for very long when her phone rang, waking her up. Chen Guo checked her phone. It was eSport Home's reporter Chang Xian. She immediately picked it up. "Little Chang, what's up?" Chen Guo asked. "Hi sis Chen." Chang Xian greeted Chen Guo. Even though Team Happy wasn't able to occupy the cover page of the papers after eliminating Team Everlasting in the second round, Chang Xian still maintained a good relationship with Happy. He had never slept over here, but he would always drop by Happy Internet Cafe every few days, getting familiar with the cashiers and employees at Happy Internet Cafe. When he saw Chen Guo, he would chat with her. He talked about this and that. It wasn't just limited to work. He was clearly trying to become friends as a way to establish a relationship with them. Over time, Chen Guo got used to his behavior. When he ran by the internet cafe or chatted with her online, it would never be for anything too serious. When he had business to talk about, he would always contact her by phone first. As a result, when Chen Guo saw it was Chang Xian calling her, she knew that it wouldn't just be small talk. "It's like this, sis Chen. Do you remember what day it is today?" Chang Xian asked the King's Avatar chapter 880 for what day is it today. Though Chen Guo was half asleep, this question wasn't difficult for her to answer. If it was Chang Xian asking, then it must be related to Glory. For Glory, what day was it today? The update officially goes online, Chen Guo blurted out. "What else?" Chang Xiang asked. "The 11th server also opens," Chen Guo said. "Yes, what else?" Chang Xian asked again. "What else?" Chen Guo was at a loss. After thinking about it for a while, she wasn't able to come up with an answer. On this day last year, Ye Xiu announced his retirement. In the end, Chang Xian told her the answer. Chen Guo was stunned. Indeed, even though Ye Xiu had arrived at Happy Internet Cafe a day earlier, Team Excellent Era had officially announced his retirement last year today. In other words, according to the Alliance's rules, if Ye Xiu wished to return to the scene, he can now do so, Chang Xian said. Chen Guo understood. Chang Xian wanted first-hand knowledge of Ye Xiu's return. How proactive. Chen Guo felt moved. In reality, she didn't have any information to give him. If she had wanted to report it, she would have taken the initiative to contact Chang Xian, but Ye Xiu's return. Chen Guo wasn't really sure what he had in mind. Did he plan on announcing his return now that his retirement period had ended? Chen Guo got distracted while holding up her phone. For a moment, she forgot to say anything. On the other side, Chang Xian unexpectedly maintained the silence and didn't urge her to say anything either. Chang Xian was a newbie, but he had a certain level of reporter's sense. In the previous interview, he had asked questions related to Ye Xiu and Happy. Captain Ye Xiu's reply had been recorded. That day, Ye Xiu had said, "You could say he's here. You could also say he's not." Facing this mysterious reply, Chang Xian pursued it further. The other side had replied with a "You'll know when the time comes." When was when the times comes? Because of Chang Xian's lack of experience, his interview questions had been arranged poorly. At that time, it wouldn't have been proper to ask such a question, but after pondering over it, he felt like the time would come at a special moment. For example, Ye Xiu's fulfilling his full year of retirement. From that day onwards, when Chang Xian checked the calendar, he would never forget Ye Xiu's retirement period. Once the date reached today this year, it would mean Ye Xiu could return to the pro scene. So when the day came, Chang Xian impatiently contacted Chen Guo, and this time he didn't want to mess up because of his own inexperience. He stayed patient and calm. Up until now, he had only stated that Ye Xiu could officially return. This method was undoubtedly much smarter. Even though he didn't raise a question, he had revealed the subject of their conversation. Now, he needed to see how Chen Guo would respond. Chang Xian patiently waited. Chen Guo wasn't aware that her mind had wandered off a while ago. After snapping back to reality, she felt like Chang Xian had just finished talking. She replied, "Right, he can return." "Then does he have any plans in store for his return?" Chang Xian asked. In reality, he hadn't confirmed that Ye Xiu really was in happy, but by directly jumping to this question assuming that Ye Xiu was inside happy, he would be killing two birds with one stone. I'm not sure. Chen Guo said. Oh, but Ye Xiu will definitely be back. Chen Guo was certain. Everyone is hoping that this day will come soon, Chang Xian said. It will definitely come. Chen Guo said. These powerful and resonating words stunned Chang Xian. His intuition told him that Chen Guo didn't have a clear idea of what exactly Ye Xiu planned to do. These seemingly certain confirmations sounded more like a fan's wishful thinking. I don't know if there's maybe a chance for me to interview him. Finally, Chang Xian carefully requested. This. I'll have to ask him before I can give you a reply, Chen Guo said. She didn't know, but her reply made Chang Xian wild with joy. He could finally confirm that Ye Xiu was in happy. As long as he followed happy closely, he didn't need to worry about not meeting this god. Chang Xian had forgotten, though, that his senior, Cao Guangcheng, had reported for excellent era for 8 years, yet had only been able to get an interview with Ye Xiu on QQ once. I hope I'll be able to get this opportunity. After hearing a definite reply, Chang Xian became more confident and patient. His heart was thumping loudly. He could already begin to imagine what type of questions he would ask when he saw Ye Xiu. I'll contact you in a bit, Chen Guo said. Okay, then I won't keep bothering you, Sis Chen, Chang Xian said. The two hung up. Chen Guo didn't hurry over to ask. At this moment, everyone in happy was probably still sleeping. Chen Guo rolled over and continued making up for her lack of sleep. At the interview station, Chang Xian hung up the phone with a big smile on his face. Cao Guangcheng happened to see it. What are you so excited about? Cao Guangcheng asked with a smile. Ye Xiu, Chang Xian happily replied. What about Ye Xiu? Hearing this name, Cao Guangcheng's heart twisted. His feelings were complicated. 8 years. As the reporter closest to Ye Xiu, he could only get a QQ interview at best. It was a stain on his career as a reporter. Ye Xiu is at Team Happy. Maybe I'll even get the chance to interview him, Chang Xian said excitedly. Ha ha. Cao Guangcheng smiled. Ye Xiu was at Happy. That wasn't a secret, was it? Who didn't know that? As for getting an interview because you knew where Ye Xiu was. Cao Guangcheng laughed at that logic. He really wanted to pull Chang Xian over and let him take a good look at him. Cao Guangcheng, a gold medal reporter in the Glory community, had known that Ye Xiu was very, very close to him, but an interview opportunity. Far, far away. Young people. Cao Guangcheng sighed. He wasn't jealous of Chang Xian's opportunity. He patted Chang Xian's shoulder. Keep up the good work. After saying these words, Cao Guangcheng returned to his room. Chang Xian wasn't aware of Cao Guangcheng's peculiar mood. He was still immersed in happiness at verifying Ye Xiu's whereabouts. Following afterwards, he ran over to his computer to search up Ye Xiu's past. He had begun actively doing research. Team Happy. When everyone got up, it was already late at night. They had stayed up all night and campaigned through higher-level dungeons non-stop, so they had been exhausted. After washing up, the 10 went to the practice room one after the other. They went to their respective seats and logged into the game. And at the same time, logging on to their QQ, checking their emails, going to websites they frequented, everyone had their own habits. After logging into the game, everyone subconsciously went to check the Heavenly Domain dungeon records, the level 75 ones, of course. The break wasn't over yet. All of the remaining 20-player first kills had been obtained. Apart from these records, even a few of the hidden boss first kills for 5-player dungeons had been taken. After all, 5-player dungeons could be run more times per day than 10-player dungeons. These teams would run them again and again. If they found a hidden boss, they obviously took care of it. When they checked the chat group, it was just as lively as it had been that morning. All sorts of discussions were happening. Some of these were related to records too. In the end, most of the first kill records were taken away by Happy. That guy Ye Xiu didn't sleep last night. He and his group ran dungeons again and again and again. How could they not have taken them all? Is that guy really thinking of having his current team topple Excellent Era in the Challenger League and returning to the Alliance? Wasn't it said that there is no Ye Xiu in Team Happy's registration list? It's the Challenger League. Members can often be switched and even added in during the later stages. Maybe he's waiting for the retirement period to end. Speaking of which, that's today, so he can return, right? Doesn't matter if he can come out of retirement or not. I don't think the Challenger League prohibits retired players from participating either way. But logically, the Challenger League is an official tournament, so shouldn't it be restricted? The problem is that he isn't restricted. It's been overlooked. It doesn't even matter if he announces his return. In any case, he's not going to join a team during the winter transfer period. He's definitely planning on charging through with that Team Happy. If Ye Xiu returns and joins Tyranny. You're joking. How could Ye Xiu go to Tyranny? I'm just saying, what if? If Ye Xiu joins Tyranny, Tyranny's main 5 players, Tusk, FCK, don't talk nonsense, that'd be too scary. Ha ha ha, you're already trembling. That roster would seriously be terrifying, someone added. When everyone saw the name, everything went silent for a moment. Lord Grimm. Everyone knew that the person sitting behind Lord Grimm was Ye Xiu. A god is lurking. Someone joked, "What level are you guys?" Ye Xiu asked a very normal question. "We haven't leveled, we've been dungeoning all day. In terms of experience, it's worse than running level 70 dungeons." One person replied, "Of course. It looks like you guys had better hand over your characters so they can level. I wonder how many stat points the new quest rewards give. We don't know about skill points either. The new cap is 5,500. Then in proportion, we should be able to get 400 points. FCK, we finally get more skill points." The person speaking probably didn't have a high number of skill points on his account and felt sorry. Don't be happy too early. The new level 75 skills haven't appeared yet. That might make allocating skill points even more difficult. The conversation switched topic again to something more ordinary. More normal topics made the players who were usually battling it out more relaxed. It was a rare period of time for true friendship to bloom. At this moment, Chen Guo finally found Ye Xiu. "Right, today that little Chang called asking about you coming out of retirement. What are your plans?" The King's Avatar Chapter 885. "Yeah, I can come out of retirement. Time flew by so fast." Ye Xiu's voice carried a trace of nostalgia. It had already been a year since he had departed from Excellent Era. "But there's no need to announce my return right now. In any case, I won't be able to rejoin the pro scene this season. I would have to wait until next summer," Ye Xiu said. "True." Chen Guo nodded her head. It wasn't only the reporter Chang Xian who paid close attention to the end date of Ye Xiu's retirement period. Besides Cao Guancheng, who had completely lost hope in ever getting an interview with Ye Xiu, all those with a bit of acuteness to glory news were aware of the double specialness of this day. After all, Ye Xiu was a legendary figure in glory history. A year of retirement wasn't long enough for his fame to have fallen from an immortals to immortals. What's more, news of Ye Xiu constantly popped up. Rumors of his return circulated for a long time. The fierce Team Happy in the Challenger League only redoubled Ye Xiu's image. These were all reasons for why numerous people followed him closely. Unfortunately, everyone waited for today in vain. No news of Ye Xiu coming out of retirement appeared in any channel. The rest was all just endless guesses and gossip. At Club Excellent Era, it was a nerve-wracking day. Ye Xiu had formed his own team to push his way through the Challenger League. Of course, they needed to be on guard against Ye Xiu in every way possible. When Ye Xiu announced his return, who knew what things he would say? As a result, Excellent Era had made the necessary PR preparations. The manager, Qi Li, even called everyone on the team to gather specifically to address this issue. He indirectly reminded everyone that if an interviewer asked any related questions, They must not be careless. Qiu Li was talking about this issue solemnly when he heard a disdainful humph. Qiu Li looked over to see who it was and felt his head hurt. Suma Cheng. When Ye Xiu was still here, no one would have ever thought that Suma Cheng would be a huge thorn in their side. In everyone's eyes, Suma Cheng had always followed Ye Xiu around like a well-behaved child. She never said too much and never caused trouble. But now, while she still took her matches seriously, the previous Suma Cheng from before had completely disappeared. She didn't conceal her hatred and disgust towards excellent Era. Sun Xiang, Chen Yehui Qiu Li, and Tao Xuan had come across her refusals both tactfully and vehemently. That previously well-behaved girl seemed to have changed into a completely different person overnight. Truthfully, Qiu Li had tolerated her for a long time now. He was becoming less and less polite with Suma Cheng because, at this point, Qiu Li knew very well that after this season ended, Suma Cheng would certainly transfer and leave. In fact, early in the summer, Excellent Era had considered sending Suma Cheng away, but because of all sorts of reasons, it didn't end up going through. Now, from the looks of it, once this season ended, they would lose her. Whenever Suma Cheng was mentioned, he would get all sorts of headaches. In this meeting, Suma Cheng once again expressed her disdain, making Qiu Li even more nervous. Suma Cheng's relationship with Excellent Era had fallen apart long ago. Although she still took their matches seriously, that was required because of her professionalism as a pro player. As for everything else, she probably wouldn't side with Excellent Era. Would Suma Cheng comply with what Qiu Li hoped for her to do? That cold humph was her reply, and facing a player of her status, the club was powerless to do anything to her. It wasn't like they could put her under house arrest. Vice Captain Xiao Shikin noticed Qiu Li's awkward situation, but he was helpless too. It had been half a year since he had joined Excellent Era. Through all sorts of channels, he had pretty much gotten the full picture on the conflict between Ye Xiu and Excellent Era. Excellent Era's way of handling the matter was indeed unscrupulous, but Xiao Shikin could empathize a bit with the executives of Excellent Era. The other clubs seemed to be in harmony, but that didn't necessarily mean that their executives were particularly incredible. It might just be that their teams didn't have an individual like Ye Xiu. Xiao Shikin didn't have too many thoughts of gossiping about the dispute towards Excellent Era and Ye Xiu. He was more concerned about a much more terrifying reality. Excellent Era had forced Ye Xiu out, but that hadn't stopped him. Ye Xiu started anew from the new server, preparing step by step. He formed a team and joined the Challenger League. He had never given up for a single moment. On the contrary, Excellent Era had been affected by this matter ever since it started. It had already been a year, but from the expressions he saw on many an Excellent Era when he mentioned anything regarding Ye Xiu, the topic seemed to be extremely taboo. It seemed like this matter had cast a shadow in Excellent Era's heart. Ye Xiu all alone started from zero. But unexpectedly, it was Excellent Era that was pressured with the mental burden. Xiao Shikin was beginning to suspect that Excellent Era miraculously getting demoted last season might have been because of this mental burden. Now that Ye Xiu had directly become their opponents in the Challenger League, this mental burden seemed to have grown even heavier. In Xiao Shikin's eyes, Qiu Li convening this type of meeting was an unwise decision. The team urgently needed to be rid of Ye Xiu's shadow, but you just have to feel the need to bring the issue of Ye Xiu to the table. Aren't you just making the problem worse? This cannot continue, Xiao Shikin thought to himself. Just when he was about to say something, who would have thought that Suma Cheng would speak first? Manager Qiu Li, aren't you overthinking things? Suma Cheng said. Qiu Li was still feeling conflicted over Suma Cheng. He didn't expect Suma Cheng to speak up. Suma Cheng had always been too lazy to bother with them. I actually feel sorry for you. Suma Cheng continued. You've worked together with him on so many things, yet you don't understand him at all. He's a pro player and he's very professional. He has dedicated everything to glory, to competing. Did you think that because you've treated him like this, he's set on getting revenge? You're wrong. He's coming back because this is where glory lies. He's in conflict with you because he's disappointed that you guys fell so far as to drop to the Challenger League. Him treating you as an enemy has nothing to do with you guys being excellent era, nor does it have anything to do with you guys forcing him into retirement. It's simply because that's the nature of competition. That's why, Qi Li, you don't need to worry. He won't take advantage of announcing his return to say anything bad about excellent era, because in his eyes, you guys are simply a competitor inherently no different from those player teams that he's beaten along the way. The only difference is that you guys are a strong team, so he'll be even more serious and put in even more effort to face you guys. So Manager Qi Li, if you don't want to lose, then hurry up and focus on practicing. This meeting is just a waste of time. It's completely unnecessary, so I'll be going now. Suma Cheng got up and left the conference room. The room was completely silent. Just when everyone was wondering how long this silence would last, someone finally broke it. Someone stood up. I'll be going to practice, Q Fei. This rookie had only just been promoted from the training camp this season. To think he dared to speak out against the club's manager. I'll be going to practice. By saying that, it meant he agreed with Suma Cheng. Ignoring everyone else's gaze towards him, Q Fei left the conference room. The remaining people looked at one another, occasionally sneaking a glance at Qi Li. This time their captain Sun Xiang spoke up. "Ha, that child. He's really got a personality." "How interesting." FCK, everyone slapped their forehead. "Bro, I think you're misreading the issue here. It wasn't Xiao Shikin's first time witnessing Sun Xiang's stupidity. He didn't bother commenting on it. From the looks of it, this meeting wouldn't be able to continue on like before, so Xiao Shikin might as well just speak to Qi Li. Manager Qi, how about we take a break?" "Okay, then everyone can go back." Qi Li used this as a pretense. All of the players left one by one. Qi Li walked out last gloomily but discovered that Xiao Shikin had intentionally lagged behind. He immediately understood that this god wanted to speak with him. "Manager Qi, I have some thoughts on this matter that I wish to speak to you about." Xiao Shikin saw that everyone had left and promptly began speaking. "Vice Captain, please do." Towards this god that they had went all out this season to invite, Qi Li didn't dare to neglect him. "It's like this." Xiao Shikin began speaking candidly about his thoughts on Excellent Era's current situation. "Right now, Ye Xiu is an opponent we need to face. We cannot let this burden continue pressing on us. In terms of strategy, we should look down on him. In terms of tactics, we should redouble our efforts." Xiao Shikin discussed what he thought would be the correct approach. Qi Li listened to Xiao Shikin's plan and felt very moved. The cost of the transfer for him in the summer was completely worth it. The two who had been traded away, Liu Hao and He Ming, would never have been as calm as Xiao Shikin, especially that Liu Hao. He would have probably been thinking up all sorts of schemes to fight against Ye Xiu. But then again, Xiao Shikin was more of a spectator who could see a more clear picture with wider parameters. An outsider like him would be the only one who would be neutral towards Ye Xiu. Fortunately, this outsider had woken him up at a crucial moment. Qi Li had also become aware that his worries about Ye Xiu had already intangibly increased the burden on their shoulders. They needed to give up on this attitude and treat Ye Xiu as just another opponent like those player teams they defeated before. That sounds familiar. Qi Li thought about it and suddenly recalled what Suma Cheng had talked about a few minutes ago. He suddenly went into a daze. "Manager Qi, what do you think?" Xiao Shikin saw that Qi Li was lost in a daze and hadn't spoken in a long time, so he asked this question. "You're right. We should rid ourselves of these chains." Qi Li nodded his head. He had made his decision. In the future, he needed to communicate more with this vice captain. As for Chen Yehui, he he needed to call him over and remind him the king's avatar chapter 886 after working day and night. They had taken all the necessary first kills from the heavenly domain dungeons. All that was left were dungeons of larger scale, like those involving 50 or 100 players. There was no exact answer for whether a group of pro players could clear those dungeons higher level than themselves, because no one had tried before. It wasn't possible for a pro player to hang around in game all day. This was only a special occasion where they had a small break during the season, so it was not like the summer at the end of the season. There was a match waiting for them after these 2 weeks were up, so they couldn't muck around and slack off during this period of time either. After chatting casually with the pro players in the pro player chat, Ye Xiu returned to the game. "What are we doing today?" everyone asked. "Making a guide," Ye Xiu said. "Guide?" Everyone stared blankly. "I'll be making a guide. You guys use this time to practice," Ye Xiu said. Everyone scattered afterwards. Seeing that they weren't going to dungeon today, Mo Fan became disappointed immediately. He didn't expect that Ye Xiu would turn around and instructed Wei Chen. "You go help them practice in the dungeons." Wei Chen nodded. Team Happy didn't have the specialized training software the pro teams did. This was why all of their training contents were achieved by manipulating various kinds of environments in-game. Of course, there was no lack of content for training in a dungeon, especially training which involved aspects of teamwork and mutual understanding. The dungeon's entry was limited, so they couldn't practice repetitively, but this didn't put a dent in the players' resolve. The entry was limited, but their accounts were not, so Happy prepared side accounts of all classes. Everyone would use the side accounts, equip them, and run the dungeons. "But if it continues like this, when are we going to reach level 75? Chen Guo was doubtful. Their characters were not like pro characters of pro teams in the first place. Those guilds could level continuously for 24 hours. For the available time they had, part of it would be spent on training side accounts. Chen Guo thought it was quite a pity. Compared to leveling up, it's more important to maintain their daily training, Ye Xiu said. "With our strength, it's unlikely for us to lose just because our opponent has the advantage in level. In addition, they might not even have this advantage either. We spend more time playing the game than most players." Chen Guo thought it was reasonable, so she didn't speak anymore. Due to Ye Xiu's absence, the team was missing one person, but Happy's current guild strength wasn't exactly sitting at 0, so they were still able to call for someone to take his spot. However, a normal person wasn't able to pick up the burden of covering for Ye Xiu in combat ability. Even the role of the main tank, which Ye Xiu was always in charge of, couldn't be replaced by a player specialized in the knight's class. In the end, they found a healer. The main tank's job was taken over by the valiant girl, Tang Ru. The group found a 10-player dungeon and immediately entered it. As for Ye Xiu, he also pulled out a group of people from the guild. Hearing that they were going to enter a level 75 dungeon, the players were quite enthusiastic in signing up. Normal players wouldn't even dare to dream about entering a level 75 dungeon, even if it was just a small 5-player dungeon. But how could the people who joined Guild Happy not know about Lord Grimm's capabilities? Last night, those people from Happy were able to take down all kinds of first kill records. This attracted a lot of admiration from players of other guilds. Now that Lord Grimm was about to lead them to complete a dungeon, even though it wouldn't be a first kill, it was enough to be enthusiastic about. Chen Guo was more familiar with the players in the guild, so it was Chen Guo who recommended a few decent players in the end. After entering the dungeon with the small team, Ye Xiu immediately started to study the dungeon in detail. The dungeon guide he was making this time was different from the efficient guides he had made in the 10th server, which aimed to break the record. Instead, he was aiming for a safe guide that aimed to complete the dungeon consistently. Evidently, Ye Xiu wanted to mobilize the guild's strength of Happy early on. Otherwise, it would take forever for just the 10 of them to collect enough equipment for themselves. No one knew how much more effort it would take to lead a bunch of normal players instead of pro players, but this could also reveal more problems, so the guide would just have to be more specific. After all, the guidebook Ye Xiu was working on this time wasn't for pro players, but for normal guild players. After coming out of the dungeon, Ye Xiu's thoughts were merely in its rudimentary form, but the normal players were almost excited to death because they were able to get a purple level 75 equipment from this dungeon. The probability of getting a purple equipment in a 5-player dungeon was low enough, so the chance of getting an orange was even lower. Purple equipment were already rare enough to most normal players. This process continued for the second and third time. After all, it was truly difficult for a normal player to kill a mob that was 5 levels higher. As a result, making the guide was much more difficult for Ye Xiu. 1 day, 2 days, 3 days. Ye Xiu worked hard on the guide, but on the other team, Mo Fan was not relaxed at all. Even though Ye Xiu wasn't present, Wei Chen's competence in leading the dungeon was enough. Of course, it wasn't hard to come up with sets of fighting methods that required coordination. As for Mo Fan, Wei Chen wasn't Ye Xiu, so he didn't hold back like Ye Xiu did. Wei Chen would directly call Mo Fan out when leading. Since Mo Fan realized the reason he couldn't have a high damage output was because he didn't fit into the team's fighting style, he didn't reject the way they fought. Under Wei Chen's command, there were many puzzle pieces that fell into place for him. So it's meant to be like this. However, for a rookie in training like Mo Fan, understanding by itself just wasn't enough. He still made errors and mistakes continuously. Wei Chen's way of commanding was also much ruder. Words like idiot, dumbass, and retard flowed out of his mouth like a river. Which person received a majority of these insults? Mo Fan, of course. Mo Fan was also stuffed with anger from the insults, but Wei Chen's insults weren't unreasonable. As an unfavorable scrap picker, Mo Fan had heard all kinds of insults to his face and behind his back, so his tolerance for insults wasn't bad. When the statistics came out after the boss was defeated, his results were always disastrous, but whenever it was time to check the DPS charts, the outcome was too devastating to even look at. They were currently in a 10-man dungeon, and it was different from a 20-man dungeon where it would have been impossible to find the location without entering the system. In the dungeon, Mo Fan performed by himself, so his statistics were higher than Chen Guo and Luo Jai's. But now that they had been integrated into the system, Mo Fan's result in his damage output was now worse than those two. They were currently running 10-player dungeons, so unlike 20-player dungeons, it wouldn't be so bad that he couldn't find something to do within the team. In the past, for this dungeon, Mo Fan dealt more damage than Chen Guo and Luo Jai when he fought alone, but now that he had been integrated into the team system, Mo Fan's damage output couldn't even compare to those twos. Fortunately, he knew that the problem didn't lie in their fighting style, but because his own skills had not yet reached the fighting style's requirements. Fortunately, he understood that this wasn't an issue in strategy, but rather his ability to integrate and coordinate properly with the others. Mo Fan continued to work hard, and his statistics slowly improved after every boss. Mo Fan continued to work hard. With every boss that they defeated, his DPS improved. 3 days had passed, and Ye Xiu was finally able to produce one guide. As for Mo Fan, his damage output results were finally able to surpass Chen Guo's Chasing Haze and Luo Jai's Concealed Light. However, from what they could see, those results were still too unstable. 3 days had passed now. Ye Xiu had finally finished his first guide draft. As for Mo Fan, he had finally surpassed Chen Guo's chasing haze and Luo Jai's concealed light on the charts. His achievements so far were still rather subpar, though. But for Chen Guo and Lu Jai, this was saddening enough for both of them. But for Chen Guo and Luo Jai, this already hurt their hearts. Only a few days had passed, and Mo Fan had almost already gotten used to this kind of play style. This guy's foundation was enviable for players like these two. It had only been a few days, yet Mo Fan had pretty much grasped how to coordinate with the team. His grasp of the foundations made these two players extremely envious. The King's Avatar Chapter 887. Ye Xiu's guide this time was different from his guides in the 10th server. At that time, the purpose of his guide had been for dungeon records, which required high precision. No matter how well he wrote that guide, it was simply not possible for every player to follow along. But this guide, the main purpose was to teach players how to clear the level 75 dungeons. Although the guide had certain requirements, Ye Xiu wasn't aiming for efficiency, so the easier it was, the more people could use the guide. This type of guide wasn't just for the guild elite teams to use, but rather the general population. As a result, using the guide as their guild's sole weapon wasn't an option. Although Guild Happy was still weak, the rain and wind that followed Ye Xiu in the heavenly domain definitely caught the eye of the club guilds. It wasn't possible that his guild had no spies in it. This type of dungeon guide didn't require a text document to read. Just by following a team a couple of times, an experienced player would be able to replicate the strategy on his own almost perfectly. When the time came, the spies would share the information that they had learned, so why not just take the initiative to knock on their doors? As a result, once the first guide was completed, Ye Xiu sent a mass message to all of the guild leaders on his friends list. Guide, would anyone like a guide? What guide? The first one to reply was Tyrannical Ambitions Jiangyu. This guild leader had personally experienced the buying and selling of guides in the 10th server, so he was especially sensitive to this type of news and reacted swiftly. Afterwards, the other guild leaders followed up. No guild sat by idly. A level 75 dungeon guide that teaches you how to beat the dungeon even with a level disadvantage, allowing you to compete for all sorts of records. Ye Xiu mass messaged again and described his guide with attractive words. Guild Happy had filled the record board with first kills and first clears. Ye Xiu himself was a god, so the guild leaders didn't question the efficacy of the guide. However, they also knew Ye Xiu wasn't here because of his sense of altruism, so one of the enlightened guild leaders asked, "What price?" "It's not that expensive. A level 75 orange equip. Any would do," Ye Xiu said. Unless it was a dungeon record reward, the drop rate for orange equipment was very low. However, the club guilds had a vast player base and didn't lack in strength. With this guide, countless players could immediately begin clearing these dungeons. Considering the number of players and teams that could run the dungeon at a time, the production of orange equipment was eventually ensured. No level 75 orange equipment had appeared in the market yet, but that didn't mean the price was very high. This time, Ye Xiu's asking price was quite conservative. He was worried about the guild leaders calling him out for being shameless, leading them to think about the deal more carefully. Once they pondered over it, they would most likely figure out that this wasn't the only means to obtain this guide. If he gave an asking price that these club guilds considered trivial, these big shots would be too lazy to bother haggling and simply slam down the hammer. Sure. As expected, many of the guild leaders nodded their heads, but they didn't forget to ask, "But we don't have any at the moment. We'll pay you when we get one." "All right," Ye Xiu replied. Apart from those guilds who held records, none of the other ones had any level 75 orange equipment, so their words weren't false. Speaking of which, these guild leaders had no reason to act as shamelessly as little thieves. Even if the two sides were competitors, relying on such a despicable and low method was too unscrupulous. Soon afterwards, he asked for the guild leader's emails and started sending out the guides. At this moment, he received a message from Lulen Slash, who appeared rather distressed. "God, is this necessary? It's just an orange piece of equipment and not anything major, but you still want to trade it for a guide. Doesn't that seem kind of pointless?" As a matter of fact, to these powerful guilds, an orange piece of equipment was nothing. Lulen Slash's mind was very clear. No matter how good of a relationship he had, when it was time to settle a debt, he would not hesitate, but this matter made him feel rather gloomy. He clearly felt that an orange piece of equipment shouldn't qualify to be elevated to the status of even brothers' accounts should be settled without ambiguity. Ye Xiu's actions made him feel uncomfortable. "Oh, don't mind it. I just mass messaged all the guild leaders in my friends list." "Ye Xiu, oh, so it's like that." Lulen Slash felt relieved. "I'll send you a guide in a bit. With our relationship, the fee obviously isn't needed," Ye Xiu said. "Of course." Lulen Slash was very happy. He soon sent the guide to everyone. Not long afterwards, the guild leaders met him. "What? That's it." Ye Xiu had only sent them a 5-player dungeon guide. "Did you think an orange equip would be enough to trade for every single dungeon?" Ye Xiu justified. "So you're saying one dungeon, one orange equip?" all of the guild leaders asked. "Yes." "Will there be any other dungeon guides?" everyone asked. "Do you guys still need them?" "Of course." "Then yes, hurry up and send them." "Wait, I'm still in the process of creating them," Ye Xiu replied. In fact, not only had he not written them yet, he hadn't even done any research on them yet. The first guide was sent out just like this. Afterwards, each guild had their own arrangements. After Ye Xiu gave the guide to Chen Guo and Wu Chen, he continued with his work. Second guide, third guide. After Ye Xiu wrote these guides, he directly sent them to the guilds. If it was too much, no one said anything. It wasn't a $20 million trade or anything. At midnight every day, the dungeons would refresh. Ye Xiu would go with everyone and run 10-player dungeons. During that time, he noted if he could also create a guide for that 10-player dungeon, but after observing for a while, he gave up in the end. The difficulty of a 10-player dungeon was much higher than the difficulty of a 5-player dungeon. Ye Xiu joined the team and naturally took up the role as the leader. It was rare for Mo Fan to get a peaceful atmosphere, but Wei Chen was too used to yelling at him. Even though he wasn't leading anymore, as soon as he saw that Mo Fan was doing something wrong, he called him an idiot, a fool, a dumbass, and so on, just like he had before. Mo Fan could only grind his teeth and quietly endure the insults. On the DPS charts, his numbers continued to improve. He was constantly getting better and he knew it. Club Excellent Era. After the talk with Xiao Shiken, Kui Li went to talk with Chen Yehui, requesting him not to focus on Ye Xiu and concentrate on their guild's long-term development instead. Chen Yehui hadn't been in the meeting between Kui Li and the team, so he naturally had no idea why Kui Li suddenly said that to him. After thinking about it, he hadn't crossed paths with Ye Xiu recently. Their club hadn't suffered any losses because of Ye Xiu. Even so, Chen Yehui acknowledged Kui Li's words. "Don't focus on Ye Xiu. Are you saying our biggest competitor isn't Ye Xiu this season?" Chen Yehui said. "It's still Ye Xiu, but we can't lose our cool just because of him. Don't you think we put too much pressure on ourselves because of how highly we hold Ye Xiu? In terms of tactics, we definitely won't underestimate him. No one knows how terrifying Ye Xiu is better than us. However, in terms of strategy, we need to look down on him so our team can maintain a calm mindset." Chen Yehui more or less understood Kui Li's intentions. What he was puzzled about was that Kui Li was talking about the team. What did that have to do with the guild? Since the update, what has Ye Xiu done? Kui Li suddenly asked again before Chen Yehui could complete his thoughts. As soon as Kui Li mentioned this matter, Chen Yehui forgot about whatever strategy or looked down. His heart was fretful. "Have you not looked at the game? Have a look." Chen Yehui turned his monitor with the game screen on it for Qi Li to see. Then he opened up the level 75 dungeon record boards. The 4 guild happy names on the first clear board stood out. Apart from that, there were a bunch of other names. Qi Li immediately noticed Lord Grimm. After looking at the other names, he stared blankly. These are Tiny Herbs players. Yeah, the night the update came out, the pro players were all sleeping, so Ye Xiu led Team Happy and achieved a bunch of first kills. Once morning came and the pro players logged on to see the update, the other records were split, but at that moment, Ye Xiu collaborated with Team Tiny Herb and took down a 20-player dungeon together. Chen Yehui explained. "Oh," Qi Li replied. "I feel like the players on our team still have plenty of energy. At this moment, why didn't we let them go for any records?" Chen Yehui was very depressed about it. He had talked to Qi Li about the matter of Team Excellent Era having energy to spare. When the update was dropped, he felt like it was the perfect opportunity. Who would have thought the club would remain idle and let Ye Xiu take the spotlight? If Excellent Era's players had stayed up all night yesterday, wouldn't half of those records be under Excellent Dynasty's name? See. I told you before to pay attention, to calm yourself and keep your heart steady. Now you've gone over the top. I decided to reconsider sending our pro players to go into the game and beat Happy. The center of our work should revolve around studying the new update. In particular, working together with the technology department and make sure they get what they need. As for the pro players, they need time to familiarize themselves with the update too. They don't have as much free time as you think," Qi Li said. This time Chen Yehui was completely dumbstruck. What's going on? Suddenly, Qi Li, who had been in the trench with him, had leaped out. "You're going to let Ye Xiu continue his rampage," Qi Li added again. "As for Happy, just think of them as another club guild like in the past and do what you need to do." Chen Yehui was about to cry. He couldn't help but retort. "Like in the past." In the past, what guild had a god like Ye Xiu watching over them? The King's Avatar Chapter 888. Chen Yehui's retort stumped Qi Li. For a moment, he didn't know how to respond. A god watching over a guild for a long period of time had never happened before. However, how much of a difference could one person make? Qi Li couldn't come up with any suggestions. In the end, he could only act like he was a leader. "You're more experienced with matters in the game. I trust that you'll be able to deal with it accordingly." Chen Yehui really wanted to cough up blood on Qi Li's face. Fortunately, he could also see that Qi Li only appeared to be casting the matter aside. That didn't mean he had truly flung it aside. He just couldn't come up with any good suggestions for the time being. How do we deal with Ye Xiu? This topic had been studied by every team in the Alliance for 7 years. Only one team managed to luckily escape this predicament. Ye Xiu's home team, Excellent Era. But now, the Alliance no longer directly competed with Ye Xiu, so they could turn a blind eye towards him and be worry-free. On the other hand, Excellent Era would need to face Ye Xiu in the Challenger League. There was only way to return to the Alliance through the Challenger League. The single subject that Excellent Era hadn't bothered studying for 7 years now needed to be compensated in this short amount of time. Whether it was in the game or in a match, they would need to face Ye Xiu. Ask other teams for help? No, that would be too disgraceful. Qi Li was conflicted. Excellent Era had forced Ye Xiu to retire because they knew that Ye Xiu was too difficult to deal with. As a result, they didn't want him to run to another team and cause trouble for them. They didn't think that he would be so stubborn and refuse to give up even after being forced out of the competitive scene. He even became Excellent Era's biggest problem. Look down on him in strategy, pay attention to him in tactics. Qi Li's mental state started to become unbalanced again. He immediately recited those words silently to himself. After reciting these words twice, a light bulb suddenly flashed in his head. The responsibility of dealing with Ye Xiu still fell onto this person, Xiao Shiken. How to deal with Ye Xiu was a problem that Xiao Shiken had certainly worked with during his career on Thunderclap. An excellent era had all sorts of detailed information on Ye Xiu. Why not let Xiao Shiken study those thoroughly? This year had gone by too chaotically. Qi Li slapped his forehead. I still have business to take care of. I'll be going. Qi Li patted Chen Yehui's shoulder and said goodbye. He had an idea on how to deal with Ye Xiu, so he left. Chen Yehui was still standing there in a daze, though. The week break for the update flew by. In the blink of an eye, it was already 12:14. The 9th season of the Pro Alliance would resume again. In these 11 days of intense leveling, there was very little difference in the leveling speed by the Pro team's characters. After these 11 days, all of them had reached level 75. It was confirmed as soon as the first day began. According to the dungeon and monster experience gained, all of the clubs had calculated everything accurately. If it wasn't enough to get these characters to max level, how could they allow the pro players to take their pro characters into the game and familiarize themselves with the update instead of power leveling? In terms of levels, the pro characters had no advantage. Since they could reach level 75, other characters being power leveled all day and all night naturally hit level 75 too. That didn't only include the core characters of the club guilds. Among the normal player base, there were many who leveled like crazy too. During this time, all of them knew that whoever reached level 75 first would have certain advantages. Reaching level 75 first meant getting a head start in dungeons, and getting a head start on acquiring stronger level 75 equipment. The club guild players weren't worried about this point though, because they had obtained guides from Lord Grimm and had started clearing level 75 dungeons long ago. For them, leveling wasn't as pressing a matter. In the 6 new level 75 Heavenly Domain maps, there were a total of 10 5-player dungeons. Ye Xiu worked sedulously on his guides. Even though they would be able to reach level 75 quickly through power leveling, it didn't mean Ye Xiu's guides had no value to them. Once their players reached level 75, they would begin challenging these dungeons for the first time. Familiarizing themselves with every dungeon would take a lot more time than reaching level 75. However, with Ye Xiu's guide, everything was now easily solved. If the dungeon could be beaten by lower-level players, then once the players reached level 75, it would be even less of a problem for them. Each 5-player dungeon guide required 1 piece of orange equipment. With 10 guides, that meant 10 orange equips from each team. There were 20 teams in the Alliance. Excluding their friends, Heavenly Sword, there were 19 teams for a total of 190 pieces of orange equipment. A character in Glory could equip a total of 13 pieces of equipment including their weapon. 190 pieces of orange equipment was enough to fully equip 14 characters. Of course, Ye Xiu never indicated what type of orange equipment he needed. The club guilds weren't so nice as to give him their best ones. Out of these 190 pieces of orange equipment, Ye Xiu reckoned that there wouldn't be a single weapon among them. From what the guilds paid him, his prediction became reality. Ye Xiu could do nothing about it. After all, he didn't know what level 75 equipment each guild possessed and had no way of demanding anything specific. Moreover, these orange equips came from the dungeons that Ye Xiu wrote guides for, which meant these items all came from 5-player dungeons. Orange equipment from 5-player dungeons would be of a different quality than those from higher player raids. If not, why would raids be more difficult? Why would anyone bother running 50-player or 100-player raids? In any case, level 75 equipment was still superior to level 70 equipment. Ye Xiu and the others could only gaze at the equipment and lament at their own inadequacy. As of right now, No one in Team Happy had reached level 75. That didn't affect their victory yesterday in the Challenger League, though. As for the Pro Alliance, their matches wouldn't be as sloppy as the Challenger League matches. Countless players held their breath for these matches, ready to see the new level 75 skills in action. They wanted to see how these skills were used in the hands of pro players. The results were rather disappointing, though. Their disappointment wasn't because of the level 75 skills themselves, but rather that it seemed like all of the pro players had agreed upon beforehand not to use these new skills. In this round of matches, 20 teams played a total of 30 individual matches, 10 group arenas, and 10 team matches with 142 participating players. However, not a single player used a level 75 skill. The commentators, guests, and post-match analysis revealed the entire story. It was because the pro players still needed to study these new skills more, so they wouldn't rashly use them in such an important match. The newly obtained level 75 orange equipment from the game still gave the spectators a sight to see. Very few silver equipment had been replaced by level 75 orange equipment. However, all of the level 70 orange equipment had been completely swapped out. For small teams, this was good news. Their characters relied heavily on orange equipment. Now that their orange equipment had also improved, their character's strength naturally improved a level 2. As for those important ace characters that relied on silver equipment, for now, their silver equipment could not be upgraded to level 75 in a short amount of time. Level 75 orange equipment didn't lose out to level 70 silver equipment in terms of stats, but in terms of bonuses, the majority were slightly lacking. Consequently, it can be seen that before level 75 silver equipment replaced level 70 silver equipment, because of the value of level 75 orange equipment, the disparity in character strength between strong and weak teams would be much narrower. It would have some impact on the direction of this season's end results. Countless glory experts made this kind of analysis. In the game, as characters continue to hit the level cap and continue to acquire level 75 equipment, dungeon clear records, raids, and wild bosses began being brought up. Wild bosses once again became the most valuable commodities. But as countless guilds were wiped out, everyone knew that it was too early to battle these level 75 wild bosses. It would be best to study those large raids first and strengthen their characters. However, those were only the thoughts of ordinary people. To a god, wild bosses and raids could be carried out at the same time. However, there were too few level 75 players at Happy at the moment, so their group's strength was a bit weak. Speaking of which, everyone in the team felt a bit ashamed. None of their characters were level 75 yet, but in Guild Happy and even Guild Everlasting, there were already level 75 characters. There were too many crazy levelers out there. Let's also spend some time to level up, Ye Xiu said. Their team's leveling speed wasn't fast, but their dungeon runs went smoothly. They were the only team that could run all of the 10-player dungeons every day. As for the other clubs, even though they were level 75 and had level 75 equipment, they were still working out how to clear these 10-player dungeons. Every day, their teams would get wiped out. Then, the teams could only cry as they regained their lost experience. 20-player raids didn't need to be discussed. Just take the 10-player raids and add an even worse to it. 50-player raids, 100-player raids were the same as wild bosses. For now, they weren't considered. In the blink of an eye, a week passed. Happy had yet to meet another strong opponent in the Challenger League, so they continued to steamroll their way through it. In the game, they spent this week leveling up, so everyone finally reached level 75. At this moment, level 75 5-player dungeon records were already being contested. Blood filled the air. But that night, All 10 5-player dungeon speed records on the record board were replaced with Guild Happy's name. If it wasn't because they were limited by the number of dungeon runs possible in a day, they might have taken up spots 1 to 10 for each record with Guild Happy's name. Guild Happy's records completely left the records by other guilds in the dust. Rumors said that a player who had experienced the pioneering in the 10th server saw the record board and fainted on the spot. When he woke up, he hastily asked the surrounding players today's date and asked whether he was in the heavenly domain or in the 10th server. After hearing the reply, everyone sighed. So the nightmare was real. What happened in the 10th server is being replicated in the heavenly domain. How could this be considered a reenactment, though? Team Happy's current team was much more elite than their team in the 10th server. Tang Ru and Steamed Bun were no longer noobs like before. Seeing all of these orange equips, Chen Guo couldn't conceal her joy. They truly deserve to be record rewards. They're better than those equips from those guilds, Chen Guo praised. The 190 orange equips that the guilds paid were truly low-end goods. Among the level 75 orange equipment Circle the King's Avatar Chapter 889 Team Happy's characters were half-equipped with orange equipment. Any extra orange equipment was thrown into the guild storage and was more than enough as motivation for guild members to courageously contribute to the guild. Guild Happy was currently growing at lightning speed along an expressway. The other guilds could not do anything about their growth. However, Guild Happy sweeping through the dungeon records wasn't something they could just sit and ignore. It wasn't a problem that could be resolved just by relying on the guild's strength, though. This was a battlefield for the elites. Their side didn't have a god or a pro player watching over. How were they supposed to compete with Happy for dungeon records? These matters were related to the club, not the team or the pro players. In the regular meeting convened at each of the clubs, the guild departments reported it as an important problem. In the 10th server, when Ye Xiu had summoned the winds and rain, the guild departments only relied on their own efforts to resist. But this time, in the heavenly domain, Ye Xiu raised an even fiercer storm and swept across the lands. So far, he had only swept through the 5-player dungeons, but they were certain that ruling over 10-player, 20-player, and even greater raids was only a matter of time. Perhaps it was because of their previous experience in the 10th server. This time, the guild departments did not fight back. By raising this issue in the regular meeting, they expressed that this issue required the strength of the entire club to resolve. But it wasn't an easy problem to solve for the clubs either. Did they need to send pro players to fight for these records? A single time wasn't a big deal, but if they failed and it affected the conditions of their players in a match, not only would they not be taking back a sesame seed, they would be losing a watermelon along the way. Because as soon as a dungeon record was set, everyone knew that their opponents wouldn't just be Ye Xiu, but the other clubs as well. If your guild can send out pro players, so can ours. As a result, the pro players would all be competing for dungeon records. At that point, would they still competing in the pro league? Maybe they could reach a compromise, send out their subs to try, but thinking about it again, their subs winning a wrestle against God Ye Xiu. What a bold and imaginative dream. The clubs were unable to find a situation. The 15th match of the season taking place on the 21st was imminent. No matter the case, the league was their #1 priority. For now, this problem would have to be put aside. Once this round was over and they finished analyzing their gains and losses from these matches, by the time they began figuring out how to deal with these dungeon records, everyone realized that it was only a few days until Christmas. According to the usual glory schedule, starting from Christmas to New Year's to the Spring Festival, this period of time would often have seasonal events. In the pro scene, their grand event was the All-Star Weekend. No one knew what the contents of this year's Christmas event would be, but from past experience, these events were gifts to the players. The rewards would often be bountiful. During this event period, the club guilds would focus their efforts on doing a good job on these events. Dungeons and wild bosses could even be put aside. Yes, put aside. The clubs clearly felt like procrastinating because they didn't have a good solution at the moment. Seeing that it was almost Christmas, they let out a sigh of relief. While the clubs relaxed, Happy was still advancing rapidly. After sweeping the 10 5-player dungeons, it was now time for the 3 10-player dungeons. This time, Happy wasn't spending close to 3 hours challenging the dungeon for their first time. Everyone was fully equipped with level 75 equipment. After hitting the level cap, they received the extra stats and skill points. For these 10-player dungeons, they would be aiming for the dungeon record. Right now, they only had one opponent for the 10-player dungeon records, the system's initial minimum record. This record wasn't easy to beat either. Normal players needed a good amount of time to familiarize themselves with the dungeon before having a chance at breaking it. In theory, a character only had a single chance every day to run a 10-player dungeon, so the amount of practice was limited. But rules were dead and people were alive. A character could only try once, but multiple characters meant more tries. No, Team Happy's conditions were limited. They didn't have any special training programs. As a result, this 10-player dungeon had become practice for training their team coordination, so their familiarity with the dungeon didn't need to be mentioned. They set all 3 dungeon records in a single day. Moreover, their record times just barely beat the system's bottom line. It was only by a bit. Everyone was still thinking to themselves. But the same day, these 3 dungeon records were set again. The record holders were still happy, and their current times only surpassed their previous times by a tiny bit. It was still Team Happy, but the characters were different. Normal players who didn't understand the situation might be misdirected, but the club guilds knew clear as day what was going on. Breaking a record by just a little bit seemed very normal, but that was usually in the mid to later stages. In the initial stages, because their research on the dungeons weren't thorough enough, when a new strategy came out, a big leap would be made. The record time would often jump around between record holders for a period of time. But right now, Happy had broken the record twice and just by a bit. In their eyes, they could tell at a glance that these guys were holding back and intentionally exercising control. These guys knew for certain that no other team could even attempt to challenge a 10-player dungeon record. No one could compete against them, so they kept on beating their own records a bit at a time in order to acquire those dungeon record rewards. The club guilds yearned for this type of method in their dreams. Whenever a new level cap came out, the reason that they leveled like crazy, using all sorts of ways to improve as fast as possible, was because they wanted to be ahead of the other guilds by half a step. With just a bit of freedom over their competition, they would have the chance to do what they wanted. But with the current state of affairs, this type of opportunity was difficult to find. Right now, Team Happy was doing what normal players couldn't do and living this type of blissful life. The club guilds were envious and jealous of them. If they had enough account cards, how many times could they set a record today? It was only twice, though, because Happy didn't have so many account cards. Apart from their own characters, the extra account cards being used had been power leveled by game studios. Power leveling right now was at its highest price, but they couldn't care about that right now. Compared to taking care of a club and a team, this kind of expense was nothing. Were these 10-player dungeons going to be toyed around with by Happy just like this? Just when the various club guilds were shaking their heads in pain, someone finally acted. Excellent Dynasty. Because Team Happy hadn't been going all out, leaving room to improve for these records, when Excellent Dynasty came out full force with their team, the times improved by an enormous jump. When everyone took a look at the list of characters holding the record, one autumn leaf life extinguisher. All sorts of famous characters. Excellent Era had been relegated this season, so they no longer appeared in the Alliance matches. Numerous fans felt incomparably reminiscent. They could only run over to the Challenger League to see these resplendent characters. Now, they had run to the game. When the other guilds saw this scene, they knew that it was a confrontation between two direct competitors. Their clubs were afraid of affecting their players and didn't dare to make any rash movements. However, Excellent Era was slaughtering their way through the Challenger League like a butcher with a meat cleaver. Seeing Happy abusing everyone like a tyrant, how could they bear it? Indeed, Excellent Era couldn't endure it anymore. After talking with Xiao Shikin, Qi Li had made it clear that they would be ridding themselves of Ye Xiu's shadow, but once he heard Chen Yehui reporting Happy's string of explosive movements in the heavenly domain, he was still swayed. Excellent Era had two advantages over Happy. Their first advantage was having more experienced pro players. Their second advantage was having stronger pro characters. For the former, the other side had Ye Xiu and a bunch of unknown guys who seemed unreliable but weren't as simple as they looked. The other side was constantly improving, and the disparity between them was constantly shrinking. For the latter, they originally thought that Happy had no way of closing this gap in a short amount of time, but who would have thought that after almost 3 years, they would finally come out with a new update and raise the level cap. With the level cap being raised, although leveling to 75 only took 11 days, upgrading their silver equipment from level 70 to 75 wasn't a matter of just 11 days. Excellent Era had stronger characters because they had stronger equipment. But with the level cap raised, their silver equipment would require weeks to upgrade. However, Happy could close the gap between themselves and Excellent Era during this time through level 75 orange equipment. Their advantage that they had considered as firmly set in place was currently fading away, especially with Happy's current efficiency at gaining level 75 orange equipment. Running dungeons, obtaining first kills, selling guides, setting records. They had two teams too, using the 10-player dungeon clear speed records as their playthings. Qi Li believed that if Excellent Era still sat by and watched indifferently, it would be negligence on their part in terms of tactics. As a result, Qi Li looked for Sun Xiang and Xiao Shikin, asking for their thoughts, attacking Happy from the game. When Sun Xiang heard this idea, he instantly felt invigorated. His fighting spirit made Qi Li extremely happy. As for Xiao Shikin, he quietly sighed to himself. Sure enough, Ye Xiu's influence on this team was rooted deeply. It wasn't something that could be pulled out with just a few words. Perhaps the only way to completely rid of themselves of Ye Xiu's mental shackles was to beat Ye Xiu. But how were they going to beat Ye Xiu while carrying this type of pressure on their shoulders? Xiao Shikin discovered that he was facing a problem that couldn't be solved. H also felt worried. But no matter what, beating Ye Xiu had already become his most important task. Qi Li represented the club's interests. It seemed like he wanted to start fighting Ye Xiu and Happy from the game. However, Xiao Shikin knew clearly that in-game matters were complicated. It wasn't as simple as a 1 versus 1 or a 5 versus 5 battle. On stage, Excellent Era held an absolute advantage. But this type of advantage was crippled when brought into the game The King's Avatar. Thank you for listening to the story on KevinAudio.com Chapter 890. If it's a confrontation in game, I'd recommend not using our pro characters. Qi Li seemed to have made his decision, so Xiao Shikin did not refuse and only put forward a small suggestion. Annoying. What's there to be scared of? Before Qi Li could respond, Captain Sun Xiang expressed his displeasure with Xiao Shikin's recommendation. Sun Xiang had come to excellent era for one autumn leaf to begin with, so no matter what he did, he wanted to use this character. Previously, when he followed Liu Hao to the game, he had done so without the club's knowledge, so he naturally didn't dare to use the team's character. But now it was the club's idea, so Sun Xiang wasn't willing to use an alternate account. Qiu Li noticed Sun Xiang's fierce fighting spirit today and didn't want to lower his morale. In the end, he waved it off. That's not a big problem. Just don't bring any silver equipment. Sun Xiang had actually wanted to go into the game fully equipped with silver equipment, but since the decision had been made, he could only respect it. Soon afterwards, Excellent Era gathered together a team of 10 players and contacted Ye Xiu to swap out their equipment. Then they tackled a 10-player dungeon full force. How unfortunate! If we could bring our silver equipment, we could guarantee a time that they could only dream of. The team had broken the record already, yet Sun Xiang was still grumbling about his current character. Although Guild Excellent Dynasty was who knew how many times larger than Guild Happy, in just this short amount of time, they weren't able to gather as many pieces of orange equipment, let alone complete sets of them. For these pro characters, after swapping out their silver equipment for level 75 orange equipment, they were indeed weakened because they didn't have a full set equipped, which was why Sun Xiang was complaining. After exiting the dungeon, the 10 players headed to the next 10-player dungeon along with a group of Excellent Dynasty elites personally led by Ye Xiu. Excellent Era has come out, Chen Yu said, while looking at Ye Xiu. Everyone in Happy had seen the record too. When she checked the record board, one Autumn Leaf's name was among the list of names. If Ye Xiu saw it, would he be affected? Chen Yu couldn't help but worry. It looks like we can't relax. Ye Xiu said, let's go dungeon. It turned out that Happy still hadn't attempted breaking the 10-player dungeon record today. Wu Chen, have your guild keep a lookout for Excellent Era's movements. Ye Xiu called out to Wu Chen and sent his own message to Guild Happy. At the same time, he looked for Heavenly Justice, Conquering Clouds, Radiant, and his other alliance partners to also help out. With so many people scouting, a reply came back not long afterwards. A bunch of people from Excellent Dynasty were marching majestically towards Barrier Mountains. Barrier Mountains, everyone hurry and gather together. Ye Xiu called out to everyone. Seeing that Excellent Dynasty was heading towards Barrier Mountain, Excellent Dynasty had at least already teleported to the nearest main city and had reached that map. The players on Happy headed over there while gathering together. Afterwards, they rushed towards Barrier Mountain's 10-player dungeon, sealed Mountain Thief hideout. There was never only a single dungeon entrance. Ye Xiu didn't know which entrance Excellent Dynasty's people entered from. He only knew that they needed to hurry and beat this dungeon before they did. Work hard, everyone. This time there can't be any leechers. Concealed Light 5 summons. Chasing Haze, be more brave with your attacks. Before entering the dungeon, Ye Xiu called out and had Lord Grim rush in. Wu Chen's Dawn Rifle and Chen Guo's Chasing Haze began attacking in coordination with each other and blasted the sealed Mountain Thieves on the left and right watchtowers. Chen Guo began tensing up, because she knew that they were truly aiming for the fastest possible time now. For the previous dungeon runs, they usually tried hard in the beginning and then relaxed in the later parts. At first, they would fight quickly. Then once they had won enough time to beat the record, they didn't take the dungeon as seriously. However, this time, in order to pursue the fastest time possible, they couldn't make any mistakes. Despite these circumstances, Ye Xiu still wanted her to be braver. I'll press my luck. Chen Guo was thinking too much. She definitely wasn't someone who flinched from danger. She didn't want to be their reason for failure. Chasing Haze closely followed Wu Chen's Dawn Rifle. The two were practically duplicates of each other. Whatever Dawn Rifle did, Chasing Haze copied. Even though she would always be slower by half a step, Chen Guo felt like she wouldn't make a mistake this way. After fighting for a while, Wu Chen noticed it and didn't know whether to laugh or cry. "Stop copying me. My current play style doesn't fit with your launcher." Chen Guo was startled. When she thought about her previous playstyle and looked at Dawn Rifle's weapon, she suddenly came to a realization. Dawn Rifle's weapon, hand cannon Scarlet Fire Baron. Because of the various fire element buff bonuses, Wu Chen had changed his skill tree and emphasized skills that dealt fire damage. This type of skill allocation wasn't uncommon. Launchers had a playstyle called Fire Cannon, which focused on buffing the fire element damage and using other skills to complement it. Wu Chen was a launcher pro player, so he was familiar with all sorts of playstyles for his class. Playing a fire cannon playstyle wasn't anything unfamiliar to him. Chen Guo's Chasing Haze was different. Her launcher belonged to a different school of thought. Heavy artillery. The skill allocation was very different from fire cannon. Right now, she was drawing a tiger using a cat as a model. Wu Chen was mainly using skills like flamethrower as damage-dealing skills, but Chasing Haze only put in a skill point into those skills and used them as control skills. Fortunately, the problem had been discovered early on. Chen Guo hastily corrected herself and stopped copying Wu Chen's Dawn Rifle, relying on her own skills to fight. "You can do it." At this moment, Ye Xiu suddenly came over to give her a word of encouragement. Chen Guo was surprised by it and suddenly felt her heart warm up. Even though she was the worst player among everyone here, she had never been ignored. She was a part of this team. The spirited Chen Guo didn't suddenly become a pro, but she performed much better at least. Not only did she not cower away, she didn't make any mistakes. The team progressed rapidly. Happy was very familiar with this dungeon. The signal flare shot out when the first boss Vanguard Brother Wolf fell could be blocked. When aiming for a dungeon record, it was an extremely crucial segment. If Excellent Era didn't pay attention to this detail, they would undoubtedly be defeated. Pay attention, everyone pay attention. When he falls, everyone stop him with everything you have, Ye Xiu shouted. "We know, as if you need to tell us," Wei Chen said. The final hit. Brother Wolf was at the brink of death. He pulled out a gun from his waist and was just about to shoot. At this instant, everyone attacked, including Little Cold Hand's cleric. They focused their attacks onto the hand that held the gun. All sorts of sound effects exploded. Brother Wolf couldn't control his hand and the gun flew out. It landed on the ground. Brother Wolf didn't have enough strength to pick it back up. His eyes were filled with unwillingness and despair. He reached out towards the gun and then fell. The speedrunning team didn't care about the stupid storyline. After the gun flew out of his grasp, the team pushed forward. Everyone in Happy knew that as soon as the gun dropped, this boss segment was over. They were trying to break a record. There was no time to watch Brother Wolf's bitter struggle. They crushed the small monsters and then killed the second boss with their usual strategy. Afterwards, by the time Advisor Frigid Eagle screeched, "Why are you guys here?" Happy had already surrounded him and attacked. This boss wasn't difficult. The pertinent plot wasn't triggered and the following segment had no monsters. The fourth boss, Brown Bear, became a boss that didn't need to be fought. For a normal dungeon run, the boss drops mattered much more than speed, so an optional boss wouldn't be skipped, but for a speedrunning team, they would obviously choose not to waste time on an optional boss. Team Happy quickly rushed towards the final boss. At the same time, in the sealed Mountain Thief hideout, one Autumn Leaf brandished his spear. In Sun Xiang's hands, one Autumn Leaf swept everything in his path. The hidden troops arranged by Frigid Eagle were annihilated by him alone. "With me? Hurry. We need to set a record that those guys can only dream of." This guy called out fervently to the team. He was clearly excited. From their current progress, this time's sealed Mountain Thief hideout was going even smoother than the previous dungeon. How could Sun Xiang not loudly cheer? The team quickly pushed forward. Compared to when Happy first attempted the dungeon, they were who knew how many times faster. Just destroying the hidden troops and crushing Frigid Eagle simultaneously wasn't something that Team Happy had been able to accomplish on their first run. Unfortunately, Team Happy would never encounter this situation again. Team Excellent Era hadn't been like Ye Xiu and the others, using these dungeons to practice technical skill. Towards the first boss, although they noticed that they should stop the signal flare from shooting out, they didn't know the correct method to do so. To knock the gun out of the hand, it wasn't just a matter of attacking. Enough damage had to be dealt at that instant to send the gun flying. The damage requirement was quite high too. It was only after Happy swapped all of their equipment for level 75 ones and used their highest damage skills that they could do it. Team Excellent Era chased the half-health Frigid Eagle into the courtyard and then faced the fourth boss Brown Bear. The fight was as easy as ever. It wasn't nearly as nerve-wracking as when Happy went in and out of the rooms. Good, continue forward. After clearing these two bosses, Sun Xiang shouted and one autumn leaf rushed towards the final boss. While they were eliminating the waves of monsters, a system announcement suddenly popped up. At Sealed Mountain Thief Hideout, Guild Happy had once again set a new record. Haha, so they're struggling to the bitter end, Sun Xiang laughed. But when he looked at the time, he suddenly froze. 30 minutes 20.47 seconds. Are you joking? How could that be? Sun Xiang was completely dumbfounded, so much so that the great battle god, one autumn leaf, was actually sent flying by a small monster. The new record set by Happy took less time than it took them to even reach the final boss. The King's Avatar Chapter 891 in Excellent Era's practice room, the team players were all looking at one another. They had also seen the newest system announcement. Happy's new record was ahead of them by a huge chunk. Their current dungeon run was pointless. How could that be? Sun Xiang's one autumn leaf rolled after being blown away. When he stood up again, he didn't charge back in. This guy was already beginning to mutter to himself. The reputation of pro players wasn't undeserved. Xiao Shiken was startled at first, but after thinking back, he felt like there wasn't anything the team had done wrong. Perhaps Happy performed better, or perhaps Happy's equipment was better than their current equipment, but such a huge gap in speed meant that the issue lay elsewhere. Xiao Shiken quickly found the issue. The first boss. Happy had definitely gotten rid of the first boss's signal flare, altering the dungeon's difficulty and allowing them to achieve such an extraordinary clear time. The first boss's signal flare. Yes, it must be that part. Sun Xiang responded soon after hearing Xiao Shiken's words. There's no point continuing, is there? Hurry up and call the guild department to send over another batch of accounts. We need to carefully study the first boss. Sun Xiang called out. Xiao Shiken heard the request. Wasn't this what he was most worried about? He was afraid that the team would raise Ye Xiu onto a pedestal and put all their energy into studying dungeons. Dungeons were PvA, but pro players should be focused on PvP. The reason that Ye Xiu and his team ran these dungeons was definitely in order to improve their PvP capabilities, but if Excellent Era concentrated on doing this, it would result in the reverse. There's no hurry. Xiao Shiken immediately advised against it. That's about it for this run. Let's finish it up first. There's still another 10-player dungeon, Gray Corners Underground Market. Let's go do that one next. Ye Xiu's team will most likely go to that dungeon and improve that side's record. Sun Xiang wanted to turn the tables, but it would be difficult in this dungeon. If they received another set of characters, it was just one more try. What's more, they needed to study the dungeon, meaning their run would be similar to a first attempt at a dungeon. They definitely wouldn't be able to achieve a good time. Plus, would they even be able to figure it out after just a few runs? Sun Xiang's proposal was too unreliable. A counterattack would also feel slow. As a result, Xiao Shiken suggested to hurry and finish this dungeon and then run over to the last one. They would be the ones chasing Happy then. It would act as a motivator for them. Soon afterwards, he urged everyone to hurry. After Ye Xiu's team set a record for sealed mountain thief hideout, they indeed rushed towards Gray Corner. Their goal was the same as their goal at sealed mountain thief hideout: take down the record and waste excellent Era's time. However, they hadn't found any shortcuts in Gray Corner's underground market like they had in sealed mountain thief hideout. Ye Xiu was still confident though. Their team might not be as practiced or as coordinated as a pro team like excellent Era yet, but if it was just for this dungeon alone, then Happy was definitely superior to excellent Era. They used this dungeon every day as their practice for teamwork. It was similar to having a home field advantage. Every day gave them 2 attempts, and many days had passed since their first clear. Even if excellent Era urged themselves forward, they wouldn't be able to catch up in familiarity and proficiency towards this dungeon so easily. Just do it like we usually do. There's nothing to be worried about. Before entering the underground market, Ye Xiu gave them words of advice. Even though sealed mountain thief hideout's record had frightened excellent Era, Ye Xiu knew that it hadn't been a perfect run. Perhaps just having a direct competitor made them tense up. As a result, Ye Xiu specifically addressed this point. However, that was the best he could do. The rest was up to them. They entered the dungeon. Their progress through it went swiftly like before. Mo Fan, who had never done any teamwork practice before, started following along every day after this time's DPS lesson. However, they were currently running a new dungeon. For a moment, he wasn't able to adjust. In fact, this used to be a practice method in the past. As Mo Fan assimilated into the team's combat strength naturally rose immensely. Don't look at how the DPS of Mo Fan's deception was still only better than Chen Guo's chasing haze and Luo Jai's concealed light. His integration into the team no longer made him an obstruction. In addition, by adjusting to the features of Deception's class, they could sometimes coordinate a higher DPS battle method. 41, 37, 11. Happy was the first to set a new record. It was quite a bit faster than their previous record that they had intentionally held back on. Excellent Era had arrived to the dungeon 1 step later, so they were still struggling in the dungeon. Happy's new time gave them a clear goal as what to aim for. Hurry, faster, a bit faster. This voice belonged to excellent Era's son Xiang. His leading was pretty much just urging everyone to hurry. The details of their tactics and team coordination was given to Xiao Shikin to deal with. When Happy's record appeared, excellent Era subconsciously paid attention to when they first entered the dungeon and then let out a small sigh of relief. This time, the other side's time was faster than their current time at least. They still had hope. As for how much hope they had, as the players battled and calculated in their heads, their conclusion wasn't too optimistic, especially for Xiao Shikin. He was the most clear about their current situation, so he was the closest to the truth. From their current progress, if they continued using this stable strategy, excellent Era would not beat Happy's 41, 37, 11, but if they didn't use this strategy, Xiao Shikin didn't know where else they could improve. Even pro players needed time to study this kind of task. Xiao Shikin hoped that everyone would remain calm even after losing this round. He hoped that they wouldn't stand up and get into an either you die or I die stance. The events did not unfold the way Xiao Shikin wanted. Before their final time came out, when the outcome became clear, Sun Xiang flew into a rage. He hated how his character didn't have 3 heads and 6 arms, capable of defending against 100, and crushed this dungeon with a point of his finger. The end result was that, during the final boss battle, their time went past Happy's record. Their final time was slower than Happy's record by almost 2.5 minutes. 2.5 minutes sounded like a short amount of time, but for a speed run, it was a huge ravine. To fill up this gap, The amount of effort needed wouldn't be any less than figuring out how to stop the signal flare from sealed Mountain Thief Hideout's first boss. Xiao Shikin became even gloomier. This Ye Xiu kept on making trouble for them. The more he was afraid of something, the more likely it would happen. The King's Avatar Chapter 892, Excellent Era, ran 2 dungeons in a row for nothing. After seeing how practiced Happy was at these dungeons, Xiao Shikin reckoned that the 10-player record recently set by them would be cleared out by Happy sooner or later. In the future, when pro players set out, would the world be at peace? On one hand, it had to be said that Excellent Era was very worried about Ye Xiu, but on the other hand, they were also very negligent towards Ye Xiu's companions. They kept on forgetting that Ye Xiu's side was a team as well. Ye Xiu had set his mind on forming his own team the day he had left Excellent Era. In Excellent Era's eyes, this type of team couldn't be considered a pro team, but they seemed to forgot that 8 or 9 years ago, when Excellent Era had just formed, they were the same too. With Ye Xiu at the head, he led a bunch of grassroots players from the game and carried Team Excellent Era to the peak of glory. Perhaps it was because the pro scene was no longer the same as it had been before. It wasn't so easy for a black horse to rise from nothing. Even a wealthy team like Heavenly Swords was bitterly struggling in their first season. However, nothing was absolute. Weren't miracles created by people? Excellent Era had a conflicting mentality, fearful yet disdainful. Xiao Shikin was powerless to do anything. The uneasiness in his heart became greater and greater. He was beginning to wonder if his decision to choose Excellent Era had been too careless of him. His reason for coming to Excellent Era was the same as many numerous others. Excellent Era would return to the Alliance without question and bring with them a boundless future. He came to Excellent Era not for the present, but for the future. However, he was now realizing that the solid premise for this future was beginning to waver. Facing Ye Xiu, Excellent Era was even less confident than he was, perhaps because they only knew too well how terrifying Ye Xiu could be. Now, they had suffered a complete defeat in the competition for dungeon records. Would this increase their lack of confidence even further? Excellent Era's strategic plan could be considered one step wrong, every step wrong. What now? Continue to push forward or hastily persuade them to correct their course of action? Would he able to persuade them, though? A few days ago, he had a good discussion with Qi Li. He could tell that Qi Li had sincerely accepted his suggestion, but a few days later, as soon as Happy took the spotlight in the game, he couldn't remain calm. At this moment, Xiao Shikin truly felt like he was caught between a rock and a hard place. His thoughts were no longer focused on the dungeon. How could the others not be the same? In the following section, their efficiency dropped drastically. Their progress through the dungeon even became rocky. When Xiao Shikin refocused his thoughts, he saw how the team's heart wasn't in it. His heart jumped. He felt like he had sensed something. Sun Xiang was their team's captain. Not only was he not helping to establish a proper mentality for a team, he was taking the lead to push it off balance. He completely broke away from the team. His violent playstyle showed his anger. This scene, Xiao Shikin suddenly remembered. Last season, when Excellent Era collapsed and their team's condition took a devastating dive, didn't it resemble this very scene? The players weren't focused, were unable to cooperate. They seemed to have no strength and confidence. Last season, could Excellent Era have suffered a setback? Was the setback due to Ye Xiu? It can't be. Xiao Shikin had second thoughts. At that time, Ye Xiu was focused on the game. Excellent Era was focused on the Pro League. The two sides weren't direct competitors yet. Why would they waste any time fighting Ye Xiu? Xiao Shikin didn't continue to guess. He could get the answers by asking others. Once the team finished the dungeon, Xiao Shikin urged everyone to take a break. Even if they wanted to break Happy's records, it would take a while. Once the emotions of everyone began to stabilize, Xiao Shikin immediately looked for Qi Li. Qi Li had clearly received the news. No one in Excellent Era was more aware of the events occurring in the game than Chen Yehui, and Chen Yehui had a very close relationship with Qi Li. When Xiao Shikin came to look for him, Qi Li reckoned that it must be related to what had just happened. Who would have thought that Xiao Shikin would ask about Excellent Era's sudden decline in the last half of the season? Why did Excellent Era suddenly collapse mid-season? The media spoke of it as a mystery. Everyone had tried to analyze it left and right. In the end, they concluded that the newcomer still getting incorporated into the team was the reason. When Excellent Era's internal department examined the matter, apart from these reasons, they couldn't find anything else either. At that time, Excellent Era didn't do anything that could have affected their condition. Xiao Shikin didn't say it directly, but with this as context, it was quite obvious what he meant by anything else. Qi Li listened to his question and understood. He shook his head though, no. But after saying no, he also went into a daze. No, that's what he believed, but was that really the truth? Was there really nothing? It seemed like he needed to consult Chen Yehui. Wait a second. After saying no, Qi Li suddenly had a change of heart. He told Xiao Shikin to wait and called Chen Yehui. Qi Li didn't say anything in his phone call. He simply called Chen Yehui to come over immediately. A few minutes later, a knock sounded from outside his office door. Chen Yehui had rushed over. Last season, after Ye Xiu left and went to the game, did anyone on our side run over to fight with Ye Xiu in private? Chen Yehui's heart thumped. This situation had happened before. He and Liu Hao were the primary instigators. Liu Hao had already been traded away by the team. If this bomb exploded, would he be shouldering the blame alone? Chen Yehui started to panic. At that time, they had done it behind the club's back. After a bunch of stuff happened that even affected the team's performance, no one dared to say a word. When the club examined the reasons for their relegations, they didn't pursue this topic, so all of the participants let out a sigh of relief. Who would have thought that half a season later this topic would pop up again? Chen Yehui saw Xiao Shikin in the room. This guy was even further away from them back then. How could he know about it? Chen Yehui fell silent and his expression clearly turned pale. He had already given them the answer. By the time he noticed his own actions, he realized that his slow response was enough of an answer. If he tried to cover up the truth, he would be challenging his boss's intellect. Helpless, Chen Yehui could only tell the truth. As for who to blame, he obviously pushed it all onto Liu Hao. He explained that it was all Liu Hao's idea. Liu Hao had told him about these ideas, and since it wasn't too much trouble, he just gave him a little help like providing characters and whatnot. Bang! Qi Li didn't allow him the chance to continue speaking. He slammed the table and suddenly stood up. He pointed at Chen Yehui and said you for a while, but in the end he wasn't able to say anything else. There was no point to saying anything now. If this was before and he had found out the truth that this matter had led to their team's downfall and poor performance, the participants would have certainly received severe punishment. For a staff member like Chen Yehui, he might even have been fired. But a year had already passed since then. It was too late to settle the score now. Chen Yehui retreated to the side pathetically. He didn't dare to breathe. Right now, only the manager knew. If the boss found out, what would the result be? It looks like even if this matter wasn't the primary reason for Excellent Era's sudden decline last year, it must have had some sort of effect. Xiao Shikin said. Qi Li and Chen Yehui heard his words and felt moved at how reliable this person was. He was giving them a way out, helping them lower the weight of it. Naturally, that wasn't Xiao Shikin's main intent. He followed. We need to learn from this mistake. The other two immediately understood. He was saying that Excellent Era was currently in the middle of reproducing last year's disaster. Could I say something? Chen Yehui carefully spoke up. If you have something to say, just say it. Qi Li wasn't in a good mood right now. I'm just saying in theory, this year's situation is very different from last year's situation. After all, this year, we're direct competitors with Happy in the Challenger League. Right now, Happy urgently needs to improve their character's strength so that they can close the gap between us. If we can limit their growth in game, we'll also be hurting them on stage. Since we have energy to spare, hitting them with a blow in the game could also be considered as preparation against them, Ye Xiu said. Xiao Shikin forced a smile. Guild leader Chen, the issue isn't whether we have energy or not, but rather in the game, it's hard to say who will be dealing that blow. Let's not talk about the past for now. Just take today for example. Guild leader Chen, I'm sure you've seen the contest for the dungeon records. I can be the representative for the team and say that our team put in their 100% in today's dungeons. I feel content with our performance, but there's nothing we can do about it. The reason that Happy's times are so much better than ours is because they spend all day in there. The game is their home stage. Even if our team's skill level is much higher, beating their records will require a certain amount of effort. That is the issue here. If we put in effort and we win, then that's great, but if we lose, everyone will receive a severe blow to their mentality. When match day comes, I don't know if this mental wall can be eliminated, Xiao Shikin said. There is always a winner and a loser in a competition. If we're too afraid of the negative impacts of losing and don't even try, won't that be too passive? Ye Xiu said. This isn't about being passive. This is about weight the pros and cons. You say competition, but what are we competing for? It's not like those rewards are necessary, nor does it matter much if Happy gets 1 or 2 extra rewards. So in this competition against them, we don't need to win. As long as we have a good enough time that puts pressure on them so they cannot keep reaping rewards over and over again, isn't that enough? Why have our team strike at their morale? Guild leader Chen, send me a few of your helpers. I'll bring them into the dungeons and practice. That's all we need. Xiao Shikin said, the King's Avatar chapter 893. As Xiao Shikin's words fell, Qi Li and Ye Xiu couldn't help but glance at each other. These two weren't idiots, and immediately understood the reasoning behind Xiao Shikin's arrangements. At the same time, they also realized a flaw in the methods they used to deal with Ye Xiu before. They always wanted to take him down with one move. Just like how they wanted to go in-game now to compete with Ye Xiu and ruin their plans. Was it really necessary? Hearing Xiao Shikin's words, both of them realized that no, there was no need for them to invest so much time and effort. The change in their expressions was all taken in by Xiao Shikin, but he still added out of politeness, "How does my suggestion sound?" "It's good." Qi Li nodded first before saying to Ye Xiu, "Guild leader Chen, could you make the arrangements on your side?" "Of course." Ye Xiu didn't argue any further. His debate with Xiao Shikin was silently forgot. "I'll do my best." Xiao Shikin smiled. "Then I'll go ahead with the preparations." Ye Xiu left first after saying these words. Qi Li once again sighed internally at how valuable Xiao Shikin turned out to be. After a round of encouragement and praise, what was next was to deal with the personal feelings of the team members. Apart from the first successful ambush, in the other 2 10-player dungeons that they had run, they were beaten by Happy, who managed to complete it before they did. In addition, there was a wide gap between their scores, causing everyone to feel defeated and down. They were currently all sitting silently in the training room, spirits low. Qi Li had arrived with Xiao Shikin, and the first thing they saw wasn't the group of pro players, but Suma Cheng standing outside the training room chomping on a pear. They hadn't called Suma Cheng to come along when they were dungeoning, yet she was still here. Was she here just to laugh at them? Qi Li didn't bother with her, simply nodding in greeting. It was Xiao Shikin, who was behind him, that slowed down to chat. "What are you doing here? Eating a pear. Why are you eating a pear here? I'm not allowed to eat inside." Xiao Shikin didn't know how to respond. She knew that wasn't what he meant, but she still gave him such a shallow response. She was messing with him. Xiao Shikin had been informed of Su Macheng's situation by the club. It was sad to know that she would be leaving after this season. However, Excellent Era had assured him they would find an equally skilled replacement that made up for her absence in the team. This made Xiao Shikin relieved. After all, he didn't need a pretty girl here to be eye candy, but a strong teammate who could work with them. It didn't matter if it was Su Macheng or someone else. "What are you guys rushing around for?" Then, it was Su Macheng's turn to ask, chomping on her pear as she craned her neck to look inside the training room. "We're dungeoning," Xiao Shikin said. They hadn't informed Su Macheng of their plans, so they didn't know if she knew or not. If he had been in game just now, though, she probably realized that they were dungeoning. "Oh, how's it going?" Su Macheng asked. "You're asking even though you know exactly what's happening, aren't you?" Xiao Shikin responded. "Yup," Su Macheng nodded with a smile. "I think we're done talking." Xiao Shikin was speechless, entering the room. As for Su Macheng, she stayed outside since she hadn't finished eating her pear yet. It was a rule at Excellent Era that food wasn't allowed in the training room, and after Ye Xiu left, the training room also became non-smoking. In the room, Qi Li, who had personally come to deal with this mess, was talking, bringing praise and encouragement from the club. "Not bad, everyone." Qi Li's smile seemed strangely sincere, to the point where it was extremely confusing to everyone present. "Not bad. Running a 10-player dungeon and not being able to beat Happy's record, you call that not bad?" "We just casually ran a few dungeons, forcing Happy to use all their ability to win back the records and preventing them from obtaining rewards by repeatedly breaking their own recordings. You all did very well." Qi Li wore an expression of approval, and Excellent Era's pro players continued to be bewildered. This made Qi Li wonder to himself, was his overt praise a little too much? But there was nothing further to it. He had already spoken and couldn't take back his words, so he could only steel himself and continue with the praise. "Now there's nothing more that we need to do. We can let Happy go and struggle to break those records now that they've set one with the best of their ability. We should continue to focus on training, on the competition, which are far more important than something like dungeon records. Next time, we can go and run some dungeons, and hopefully put pressure on Happy just like we did today." Qi Li's speech came to a close amongst lost glances exchanged between the players. Seeing the lack of response, he couldn't keep it up any longer. He took a hasty glance at the time before saying, "Oh, I think it's almost time for daily training. I'll leave now to avoid distracting you all." Qi Li turned, giving Xiao Shikin a meaningful look, naturally asking him to continue soothing tempers. Su Macheng was still chomping on her pear when he exited the room. He ignored her and left. "So let's start training, everyone." Xiao Shikin was a little anxious, lost as to what he should do. How bold of Manager Qi, just coming up with a round of reasonless praises without any sort of hook, praising everyone until they were all completely and utterly bewildered. And Xiao Shikin had to be the one to clear up this mess. He smiled with an airy sort of joy, saying in a cheerful tone, "Surprised?" Everyone nodded like mad. It was really too surprising. "Haha, me too. I wanted to ask for some more time to research these dungeons, because we aren't as familiar with them as Happy." Yet Manager Qi turned out to be very satisfied with what we accomplished already. "Do you know why?" Xiao Shikin said. Everyone shook their heads in silence. "It's because none of this was about winning or losing from the very start. All we had to do was come over and leave a record. Because with this one record, we've already managed to cause a lot of trouble for Happy. As for winning and losing, we only need to worry about that during the competition itself." Xiao Shikin took careful note of everyone's expressions as he talked, and noticed that his words had taken their hoped-for effect. Xiao Shikin had given them the reason they hadn't managed to run the dungeon faster than Happy. The following words told them that it wasn't that they couldn't or didn't do it, but because it wasn't worth their time. Finally, everyone recovered from the confusion of Qi Li's praise and entered a state of understanding. "So that's how it is," someone said. "Of course that's how it is," Xiao Shikin smiled. "We've done enough dungeoning for today, so let's prepare for training." "Okay," everyone agreed, returning to their desktops for training. Suma Cheng had finished her pair by now and walked into the room. "Not bad," Suma Cheng commended Xiao Shikin. "Don't cause trouble for me." Xiao Shikin had only just begun to relax when he had to put up his guard once more. "You're too nervous," Suma Cheng smiled. "You're probably quite stressed, huh?" "Of course, our opponent isn't so easy to deal with," Xiao Shikin said. "What plans do you have for now?" Suma Cheng asked. Xiao Shikin's alarm was written on his face. With Suma Cheng's current attitude towards excellent era, anyone would be suspicious of her stance. Xiao Shikin was certain that Suma Cheng would continue to do her best on the field, but it was off the field that he was worried about. "Seems like you guys have some big scheme going on," Suma Cheng commented. "Not really." Xiao Shikin shook his head. "I think what you said that day at the meeting was very true. If everyone could look at it from a better angle, then everything would be much easier. It's unfortunate that Ye Xiu's influence on excellent era is too strong, causing them to be incapable of facing these problems with a cool head." "It's not about his influence," Suma Cheng said. It's because they have guilt on their conscience," Suma Cheng said. "That's why they rush to use Ye Xiu's failure to prove themselves and cover up their own shortcomings. They aren't afraid of losing, but they're afraid of losing to Ye Xiu. It's too scary for them because their hearts are knotted with guilt," Suma Cheng said. "Let's do some training." Suma Cheng didn't continue the conversation, returning to her seat and beginning her daily training like usual. Xiao Shikin stared at her dumbly. Suma Cheng didn't turn her attention back to him. Instead, it was Sun Xiang who left his seat and went over to him. "Captain Sun," Xiao Shikin greeted. The emotions within this greeting were rather complicated. Sun Xiang was their captain, but Xiao Shikin acted and was treated more like a captain than he was. For Sun Xiang, captain was more of a title than a real position. Even so, they got along rather well. Sun Xiang not only didn't seem to mind but seemed very satisfied with this status quo. Xiao Shikin had a really hard time understanding this seemingly prideful prodigy. After all, how could an arrogant person bear having such a superficial captaincy? "Hey, about that," Sun Xiang spoke up. "About what? Are we really not going to dungeon anymore?" "Yes," Xiao Shikin said. Sun Xiang frowned, disappointed. "Our efforts should be placed more on the competition and training, right? A little thing like dungeoning, we have time to do that any time. We can go if we're bored or it's necessary for us to go check on it again," Xiao Shikin said. "Yeah, it's just a little thing." Sun Xiang nodded before suddenly pausing as if he suddenly realized something. "Little thing, Xiao Shikin. Ha 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 ha." Sun Xiang suddenly started bawling with laughter, pointing at Xiao Shikin. "Fuck, I think your focus is little off point." Xiao Shikin had thought Sun Xiang had a sudden enlightenment, but all he had noticed was this homophone. Little thing, little thing. Thus, this situation came to a close with the result of Xiao Shikin obtaining a new nickname. However, Xiao Shikin was the vice-captain, so how many would really dare to use this nickname to his face? It was only Sun Xiang who had no fear, and from that day forwards, Xiao Shikin had become Little Thing to Sun Xiang. Hey, Little Thing. Even Suma Cheng sometimes used this nickname given by the person she didn't like. Xiao Shikin wanted to cry. The King's Avatar Chapter 894 Happy had snatched 2 records away from Excellent Era one after the other, turning all of Excellent Era's hard work into nothing. Fortunately, the system existed. The system took its job seriously. Even though Excellent Era's efforts didn't show up on TV, their efforts still left a mark on the record boards. It was just that since they weren't in first place, the record could only be seen by clicking on the appropriate dungeon record list and looking at in detail. After completing these 2 dungeons, Team Happy let loose another sudden strike in order to take down the record previously set by Excellent Era, but in this attempt, they made a few mistakes and ended up failing. Even though everyone felt that it was a pity, they soon felt relieved. After all, setting records was a race against time. Even a slight mistake could lead to a slower time. These mistakes didn't need to be thoroughly examined. As long as everyone maintained their calm and concentrated in their next attempt, it would be fine. I really want to see the look on the faces of those guys from Excellent Era right now. When Chen Guo made this remark, her gaze shifted to the window. Her thoughts wandered away. However, the scene outside of the window ruined her imagination. They were currently located in their residential practice base, not Happy Internet Cafe, where Club Excellent Era was right across the street from them. Ha ha! Ye Xiu gave a laugh at Chen Guo's comment, but in reality, he wasn't nearly as excited as Chen Guo was. It was true that Excellent Era had been stepped on, but in order to take this step, Happy had to give up on many things. If Excellent Era hadn't interfered, Happy could have gained the dungeon record rewards, but everything was over now. If Happy went all out, their dungeon times would be better than Excellent Era's, but the small difference between their times didn't allow for Happy to continue using their repeat method of farming orange equipment. As a result, Excellent Era had taken away quite a bit of potential equipment and material from Happy. In this competition, Excellent Era had lost in spirit, while Happy had lost in material goods. From the direct results, Happy should be the one crying. Ye Xiu didn't become depressed at these losses, though. He didn't have time for that. An opportunity had slipped away, which meant that more opportunities were needed to make up for those losses. These opportunities were about to arrive. 12/25. Christmas was on Wednesday next week. On Monday this week, Glory would officially reveal this year's Christmas events. The Christmas events every year never separated from presents. As a result, Christmas events naturally implied rich rewards. However, in order to obtain these rich rewards, there had to be some sort of challenge. This year's Christmas event was no exception. It borrowed from the iconic features of the Christmas holiday. The main events for this year involved stealing stockings. Stockings weren't presents, but stockings were a medium for Christmas presents. The concept for this year's Christmas event wasn't difficult to grasp. The more stockings you obtained, the more presents you would get. These stockings weren't just thrown around all over the game world for players to pick up. To get stockings, you had to accept a quest and then move to a certain map. This map wasn't a dungeon-type map, but rather an arena-type map. The stealing part of the event goes without saying. Each map only had a fixed number of stockings. Who would be able to collect the most? Just relying on being sharp-sighted and dexterous wouldn't be enough. The entire event would last for 3 days, starting from midnight on December 25th. Players didn't need to treasure every single second and start accepting quests as soon as it hit midnight. The number of quests that could be accepted was limited. Every character could only accept a quest to snatch stockings 3 times every day. As a 3-day event, that meant a total of 9 attempts. There was plenty of time, so there was no need to rush. There were other details about the event. Once the information was revealed, everyone began preparing for it. 50 players will do battle. 20 stockings will be scattered around randomly. Stockings are not bound to the player and can be dropped. After all 20 stockings have been picked up, the quest ends. I say this year's event is clearly trying to have everyone kill and steal from each other. Wei Chen read the event details and expressed his thoughts on it. You're teleported to a random map. Small parties can accept quests together, but no large teams. Haha, they're not letting large teams join. It's probably to prevent those big guilds from forming 50-player teams and entering together. If it's just small parties, then we'll have to split into 2 teams. Wei Chen continued. It doesn't say that a party must have 5 players, right? Ye Xiu said. No. Wei Chen looked around but didn't see any rules regarding that. He thought about Ye Xiu's question and immediately understood. If a small party entered, they would be fighting for 20 stockings. If an individual enters, it'll be a fight for 20 stockings too. So in theory, if Happy formed two parties, Happy would only be able to get a maximum of 40 stockings per quest. However, if each of them entered alone, that meant a maximum of 200 stockings possible. However, it was hard to say how many of those 200 stockings an individual could collect. Rankings. There are also rankings. Wei Chen continued to read the event details and saw a ranking section. As expected, placing high on these rankings meant rewards, and these rewards were, without a doubt, where the greatest rewards lay. There were several rankings, and guild one, an individual one, and a party one. However, if you wanted to place on an individual or a party ranking, then for these quests, you couldn't change your status. In other words, an individual couldn't form a party with anyone. And for a party, whoever you teamed up would had to be the same people for all quests. We have to fight for these rankings, Wei Chen said. Of course. Then I'd better hurry and ask for a leave from Samsara. They'll definitely want me to be there, Wei Chen said. His position as a spy hadn't been easily obtained. He didn't want to give up on it so easily either. It just happened to be time for challenging new dungeons. Wei Chen's outstanding performance in leading teams was much appreciated by Samsara. However, his spy character in Samsara was a bit embarrassing. It still wasn't level 75 yet. Wei Chen didn't have time to level it and didn't want to hand it over to someone for power leveling. He could only squeeze in some time to slowly level it up bit by bit. Even so, that didn't affect Wei Chen's ability to lead dungeon teams. He used this currently level 72 Warlock account for these higher level dungeons. One day, one account means 3 chances. You can still do both. Ye Xiu reminded Wei Chen. I'll just tell them in advance. We can see when the time comes. At Samsara, Wei Chen played the role of a rough but very serious and responsible team leader. How are things going to be arranged on our side? Chen Guo asked. Everyone had 2 accounts on them, so it's best if we can complete those quests on both accounts, Ye Xiu said. Then who will be forming a party and who will be participating as an individual? Chen Guo asked. That will need careful consideration. Ye Xiu said the King's Avatar Chapter 895. The event announcement was released less than 2 days before the event officially started. Old players understood the importance of the Christmas event and responded immediately upon hearing the news. Those who wanted to form a party began looking for their friends. Those who wanted to challenge the event alone used these 2 days' worth of time to improve their equipment. The club guilds obviously wouldn't miss this event. For them, apart from participating in the event, they would be competing for spots on the leaderboard. The rewards from the rankings were vividly promoted. But when they thought about how Lord Grimm existed in the game, the guild leaders couldn't let out a smile. For this event, players would be teleported to random maps, and only small parties could enter. As a result, their advantage of having more players could only be displayed in the guild rankings. In the individual or team rankings, no matter how many guild members they had, they wouldn't be able to gather all of them together into a single arena. This competition would be a test of skill for elite players and teams. The top guilds would have been confident if not for the existence of Happy. The new dungeon records dominated by Happy was the clearest indicator. That was also a competition between elite players and teams, but the result, only pro teams could contest against Team Happy. The Christmas event did not interfere with the Pro League though. The event lasted for 3 days starting from Wednesday and ending on Friday. After the event ended, Saturday would be the 16th round of the season. Pro players wouldn't be running to the game to have fun instead of preparing for their upcoming match though. Even if they were interested in playing, they might play around once or twice, but no hopes could be placed on them appearing on the actual rankings. The club guild leaders were worried. These 2 days passed by in a flash. The Christmas event officially began. Because of the limited number of quests each day, there weren't that many players impatiently waiting for midnight to come. As for the club guilds, for now they didn't immediately dispatch their elite teams. With the rankings as their goal, they would first have to observe the true circumstances of this event before shooting their arrows at the target. Tonight, the club guild studied this event while actively taking note of the rankings. Lord Grimm, Happy, would they appear on the rankings soon? They did not. When the sun came up, no one from Happy had appeared on the rankings yet. Although the club guilds hadn't sent out their elites yet, their foundation was already reflected in the results. In this free-for-all situation, those on the individual or team rankings were held by the club guilds. The guild rankings didn't need to be mentioned. The first 20 placings were swept up by the club guilds. Some people compared these rankings with the alliance rankings to see if there were any differences. There were definitely quite a few differences. For example, on the rankings, Guild Samsara was in first place. After their team became the champions last season, the guild had grown ferociously. The guild members were also extremely diligent. The traditional powerhouses Blue Brook Guild, Herb Garden, and Tyrannical Ambition followed Guild Samsara. Team Tyranny had a firm grasp on their first-place spot in the alliance, but their guild Tyrannical Ambition didn't seem to be any different from the other powerhouses. Their tyranny over the alliance wasn't reflected by their guild standing. There was also Excellent Dynasty. Although Team Excellent Era had been relegated to the Challenger League, their guild wasn't going to collapse just because of that. At this moment, those who held the most hope for Excellent Era were their most loyal fans. Guild Excellent Dynasty's performance in this event was extraordinary. Quite a few mid to low-tier club guilds lost out to them. The other large discrepancy was Guild Heavenly Justice. Their team Heavenly Swords was teetering on the brink of danger. Their placing kept on pacing back and forth between the relegation and non-relegation zone. However, in this event, Heavenly Justice had an impressive placing, 7th. There were rumors that Heavenly Justice had put out rewards for this event in order to spark the enthusiasm of their guild members. Whether that was true or not would require further investigation. These club guilds attracted countless eyes, but the guilds themselves were strenuously searching the rankings to see Guild Happy's placing and check if they were a threat or not. After looking up Guild Happy, everyone felt relieved. Guild Happy's strength was still too weak. For the guild rankings, only relying on a few elite experts was useless. It was a test of the entire guild's strength. Happy's Lord Grimm and his team were mighty, but they would not be a deciding factor in these guild rankings. After a night of careful studying, the various guilds discovered another problem. Just like last year's event, the player rankings were divided by their levels. Usually, it was split for every 5 levels. In the normal servers, the separations were very detailed. Starting from level 20 after the beginner village, there was a separate ranking every 5 levels up until level 75. But in the heavenly domain, because players were all max leveled, there usually wasn't a separate ranking. However, this time, because of the new level cap, there were now 2 separate rankings in the heavenly domain. One was the level 70-74 rankings, while the other was the level 75 rankings. These 2 rankings were further split into individual and team rankings. The team rankings were based on the highest level player in the party. It had always been done this way. It was mainly to separate between those with level 70 and those with level 75 equipment. After studying these rankings for a night, the guilds discovered the problem. There were a lot fewer level 75 players than level 70 players. The level cap had been raised on 12-3. Right now, it was only 12-25. Only 20 or so days had passed since the update had been dropped. The higher the level, the more experience was required to level up. The club's core characters trained non-stop as fast as possible and reached level 75 in 11 days. Ye Xiu and Co. weren't as diligent, but their efficiency wasn't low either. A few days after these core characters, their characters also hit level 75 and began sweeping the record rankings. But for the vast majority of players, how could they have so much free time? Players who only had a few hours each day to play were still struggling to grind levels. And this group constituted the vast majority of the player base. Most club guild members were loyal fans of the respective guild's team. These loyal fans were also very passionate about glory and were naturally more willing to spend more time on the game. As a result, there were quite a few players from the club guilds that managed to reach level 75 during these 20 days. Consequently, among the current level 75 player base, those from the club guilds took up a good portion. As a result, in random distribution, it was highly likely that players or teams from the same guild would meet on the map. The distribution was clearly random. It didn't try and avoid having members from the same guild meet. With this, players from the same guild could help each other, naturally giving them an advantage over others. This hidden phenomenon was finally grasped by the top guilds after a night of observation and understanding. But if their guild had this advantage, so did every other guild's. This advantage needed to be used and guarded against. However, while some guilds had the advantage, others didn't, such as Guild Happy. The big guilds had placed spies in Happy a long time ago. Even if they couldn't get information from core players, they could still check the guild member list and check their levels. No. Guild Happy clearly didn't have too many level 75 players. During their early development stage, they couldn't be too picky, so they had good and bad players mixed into the bunch. There were always active players online every day, but there were also many that stayed offline for many days. Guild Happy was still in the process of transitioning from a player guild to a professional guild after all. Facing Guild Happy, the big guilds held this advantage. Under this situation, if they happened to have a numbers advantage, might they have a chance at giving trouble to Lord Grimm and Happy's other experts? Even though Lord Grimm had god-level might, the guilds could think of a way to deal with it. Apart from having more members, what other advantage did they have? It wasn't like they could find someone to compete with a god. This event would originally have prevented having a numbers advantage, but because of this special occasion, this scene occurred. The club guilds would naturally think up a solution, but after thinking over it, even if two teams from the same guild, if they met Lord Grimm's team, it would be a 10 versus 5. But could that be considered as having an advantage? Thinking of this point, the guild leaders felt depressed at this 10 versus 5 conclusion. With the strength of Happy's experts, 2 or 3 times their still numbers wouldn't be enough. Even more would be needed. However, any more and it would be unlikely for the situation to happen. After this entire night, 3 teams appearing in the same map had only taken place a few times. Then, if one guild isn't enough, what about multiple guilds allying together? Someone couldn't help but bring it up. In their guild leader chat group, people gradually began speaking up and discussing this topic. Samsara's doing quite well. They've gotten so many stockings tonight. Haha, your guild's doing well too. Heavenly Justice isn't in this chat group yet. Their performance this event is quite impressive. What's going on, Blossom Valley? You guys seem a bit depressed. The guild leaders spoke one after the other, discussing each other's results. At the bottom of their hearts, they all hoped that everyone else's achievements were negative numbers, so their own guild could come out on top. Everyone seemed friendly to each other on the surface, though. Wow, excellent dynasty is fearsome too. Someone seemed to have found a topic and spoke out. We're just trying our best. Chen Yehui put on a fake smile like everyone else. Compared to you guys, Happy is so much worse. Where are they on the guild rankings? We can't even find them. Someone began cutting into the main subject. Their guild has no hope of making it onto the guild rankings, but what about the individual and team rankings? The main subject had finally been touched upon. If we don't put up some countermeasures, we'll probably lose to them, no. How about we join hands and suppress them? The guild leader speaking didn't seem to be very happy. In reality, for these guilds, more brain cells died from working together than fighting against one another. The King's Avatar Chapter 896. The guild leaders were taking an indirect approach to figure out each other's intentions. In fact, Excellent Dynasty, which was Happy's most direct competitor, was very quiet at the moment. Apart from a few ha-has in the beginning, Ye Xiu mainly watched from the sidelines. Ye Xiu had more confidence than the others because Excellent Era didn't face any trouble in the Challenger League. So for this generous event, the club had encouraged the players to participate. Ye Xiu saw that these guilds wanted to ally together to cause trouble for Ye Xiu and laughed inwardly. While the others fought against Ye Xiu, his own guild would stay on the sidelines and peacefully clear their quests. How could their achievements not turn out well? Unfortunately, Ye Xiu underestimated the intelligence of the other guild leaders. If he thought of it, the others had thought of it as well, which was why everyone approached the issue very cautiously. All of them spoke casually about an alliance. Evidently, everyone wanted to take advantage of the others allying together, so their own guild could scoop up all the fish from the fishermen for themselves. If everyone wanted to take advantage, then it wasn't going to happen. Each and every one of them circled around each other slyly. After a long time, nothing came of it until everyone realized that everyone else wanted to do the same thing too. If this continued, it would never end. As a result, more and more people chose to stay silent. In the end, the matter was left inconclusive, which disappointed the bystander, Ye Xiu. However, he had the chess pieces in his hands, so he wasn't worried. The task for organizing the guild for this Christmas event had been handed over to his subordinates. On the other hand, he was busy preparing characters for the pro players. For this kind of interactive event, using pro characters would be too high profile. Who knew what might happen in a 50-player battlefield? Their own fans would be good. They might just send over whatever stockings they got to them, but what if there were enemy fans? Ye Xiu prepared these accounts meticulously and explained to them what he had learned about the event after a night of thorough research. As for Happy, after everyone woke up, they started figuring out the event. They were ambitious and wouldn't waste their limited quests to probe it out. They obviously went to players who had already completed the quests to understand the situation. After getting a grasp on the situation, Team Happy logged on. The higher echelons of the guild passed on fearful messages such as, "The wolves are here." Some people subconsciously checked the rankings immediately as if once Happy came, these rankings would be completely swept by them. In the current rankings, Guild Samsara was in the lead. The individual and team rankings were less obvious because each person and each team had 3 chances. Obtaining all of the stockings each round totaled to 60 stockings, so the gap between the rankings was still relatively small, leading to many individuals and teams with identical totals. In the individual rankings, the most anyone had managed to collect was only 16 stockings. A huge number of players had this achievement. The team rankings were more formidable. Most of the high rankings were held by club guild teams. The highest total was 30 stockings. The above were for the level 75 rankings. The top guilds were more concerned about this ranking because from common sense, the rewards and the levels corresponded to each other. Level 75 equipment and materials were what the top guilds desired the most. Happy's people had logged on. Were heaven-defying records about to appear soon? And at this moment, they were all in a predicament. Should they throw in their troops now and collide with Team Happy, or should they avoid them to let Team Happy reign freely while they switched to a different time to try? Due to no alliance forming to fight with Happy, the big guilds lacked confidence. After pondering over the issue, they grit their teeth and sent out their troops. They at least couldn't allow Happy to overthrow them so easily. As for Happy, after 2 days of discussion, they finally came up with a plan. 10 players. First, Wei Chen would lead Kaio Yifan, Chen Guo, Luo Jai, and Nwenyi to form a 5-player party. Chen Guo and Luo Jai weren't at a pro level. In terms of their individual skill, they were no different than normal players. And Wenyi's little cold hands was a healer, so he would undoubtedly need to be part of a team. As a result, the three might as well be put together. With Wei Chen leading and accompanied by the cautious Kaio Yifan, this team was quite formidable. As for the other 5, Tang Ru and Wu Chen were designated as individuals. For Mo Fan, no one ever made any arrangements for him in the first place. He hadn't considered himself as a member of the team, so he wasn't going with comply with Ye Xiu's orders. Finally, Ye Xiu and Steamed Bun formed a 2-player team. Teams didn't necessarily need to consist of 5 players. 2, 3, 4 players were fine. However, the system didn't give any advantage to teams with fewer players, so forming a team with less than 5 players was clearly considered disadvantageous. But thinking about student Steamed Bun's weirdness and carelessness, who knew what contribution he would make if he played alone? As a result, Ye Xiu might as well just run around with him. Those in a party formed their party, and those participating individually finished their preparations. They accepted the quest and teleported to the event map. Snow was always associated with Christmas, so naturally this year's Christmas map was a snow map. As soon as they were teleported in, everyone's screen was filled with a brilliant white cover of snow. Sunlight shone on the snow. The reflected light made the scene especially dazzling. Snow continued to fall at varying speeds. Ye Xiu and Steamed Bun happened to be caught in a snowstorm. Goose-feather-sized snowflakes filled the sky. For a moment, it was hard to tell which direction was what. Ah, the wind's so strong. It's even affecting our movement speed. After Ye Xiu had Lord Grim take a few steps, he immediately felt something. It was another part of what added complexity to the game. It wasn't only the terrain that affected fights. Sometimes the weather had an influence as well. "What did you say?" Steamed Bun shouted loudly. To Ye Xiu, it sounded just fine in the game, but everyone else could hear Steamed Bun's ear-piercing shout through the game's background sounds. "What are you yelling so loudly for?" Ye Xiu asked. "The wind's too loud, it's hard to hear you," Steamed Bun said. "You're too engrossed in the game." Ye Xiu was speechless. In this snowstorm, strong winds constantly screeched. Steamed Bun spoke as if he were actually inside the snowstorm and started yelling. "Let's start looking for stockings," Ye Xiu said. "Which way?" Steamed Bun asked. "It doesn't matter." Stockings were scattered around the map randomly. No coordinates were given, so in the beginning they could only search around randomly. The stockings weren't thrown out all at once. In the beginning, there would only be 10 stockings. The rest of the 10 stockings would be placed randomly within 30 minutes depending on the time and position of the players on the map. The system gave notifications when these stockings spawned, so players wouldn't be completely caught unaware. At the moment, the 10 stockings had a display for them. After someone found a stocking, the number would update, letting players know the current status of the stockings. After all 20 stockings were picked up, the system would begin a 120-second countdown. Within those 120 seconds, if no change occurred, the quest come to an end. In the event map, you wouldn't lose experience or equipment after dying, but stockings were guaranteed to drop. After 20 seconds, the character could revive at full health. However, as your death count increased, the time to revive increased at 20-second increments. In order to spice up the event, apart from stockings, items would randomly spawn to assist the players. There were no cooldown potions, invisible cloaks, fast-moving sleds, small boxes for carrying stockings, and so on. These items wouldn't be given a notice from the system. The maps wasn't too big. If not, finding the stockings and items would prove to be too difficult. At Ye Xiu's and Steamed Bun's map, all 10 stockings were still there. No one had picked up any yet. The two quickly encountered a few players, but without any stockings found, there naturally wouldn't be a battle. Once a stocking was picked up, an announcement would be made indicating who had picked it up. There was also a clear list of who had how many stockings that updated immediately. Ye Xiu and Steamed Bun still hadn't found anything yet. Finally, the first system announcement was made. Player Wooden Crate is in the lead and has obtained a Christmas stocking. Wooden Crate, let's find him. Steamed Bun yelled. In his eyes, finding a person was easier than finding a stocking, especially in this map where there was such a huge snowstorm. The character practically needed to squat down in order to even see the ground clearly. Who knew where this stocking had been found? A part of it might have been sticking out in the snow. If that were the case, it was too easy to be ignored. We'll split up and search. Ye Xiu made this decision in the end. If you see the target, tell me. Don't act rashly, Ye Xiu said. Understood, Steamed Bun replied. The two split up. Not long afterwards, Ye Xiu didn't hear it through the game, but from outside of the game. The person in front, are you Wooden Crate? You're Wooden Crate, right? Yeah, I've been hunting for you. Hand over that stocking you just picked up. Position. Ye Xiu wanted to cry. He sent a message to Steamed Bun. This guy actually said hi to Wooden Crate. He gave away his position to the target and greeted him. Only Steamed Bun would understand this type of logic. Steamed Bun replied back with a coordinate. Ye Xiu looked at it. It wasn't far. He immediately switched directions and rushed over. Oh, you're not alone. At this moment, Ye Xiu heard Steamed Bun say, of course he's not alone. The two of them had partied up in this event. The majority of players came into the event in parties of 5. He was just on his own because they had separated to search for the stockings. How could he be the only one here? Careful. Ye Xiu reminded. Actually, with Steamed Bun's current skill, he should be able to deal with 5 normal players, but Steamed Bun couldn't be surmised through common sense. Sometimes, he did things that not even a pro player would understand, but there were also times where he lost battles which he shouldn't have lost. H.M. At this moment, Ye Xiu heard Steamed Bun express his surprise. The King's Avatar Chapter 897 based on a pro player's hand speed. It was no trouble to type faster than one could speak talk. However, Ye Xiu couldn't be bothered to type. It wasn't because he was slow, but because he was worried that Steamed Bun wouldn't see his messages. As a result, he also asked as he raised his voice, "What are you so surprised at? They're gone." Steamed Bun immediately replied with an equally loud voice. "It's invisible cloak, isn't it? Be careful," Ye Xiu shouted. "Understood." Steamed Bun's voice was loud and clear. "Do you guys need to talk like thatties?" Chen Guo slammed the table. "The wind is too strong, we can't hear if we're not loud enough, don't yell." Steamed Bun explained hurriedly. Ye Xiu was speechless. That wasn't the reason why they needed to speak loudly. It was because they weren't in the same region, so they needed to deliver the sound from outside of the game. It was obvious that they needed to speak louder with their headphones on. "What do you mean the wind is too strong so you can't hear?" Ye Xiu realized that he was too careless. He should have sat next to Steamed Bun from the start. That way he could understand and communicate with him more conveniently. "Punk, invisible cloak. I see you already. Come out quickly." Steamed Bun spoke as he started to pressure and lure his opponents. "Ah, it's an ambush. Beastards, let me fix you up. Ah, there's another. Yeah, another one. What in the world, they're still," Steamed Bun shouted non-stop. Even Chen Guo, who was in a completely different map, became nervous. "What's the matter? What's the matter?" Chen Guo moved her head and tried to see the situation from Ye Xiu's screen. Ye Xiu's Lord Grim was busy hurrying over. He hadn't yet reached the location, so how could he see Steamed Bun? He lifted his head and pushed Chen Yu's head away. "Focus on your side." "What's the situation like?" Ye Xiu asked Steamed Bun. "5 thieves," Steamed Bun said. At first, Steamed Bun only saw the player called Wooden Crate, but soon, Wooden Crate's companions came to aid him. They were a 5-player team made up of friends, so they originally split up to complete different jobs. However, when Wooden Crate picked up a pair of stockings, the other 4 immediately hurried there to aid him. As a result, they ran into Steamed Bun, whom came to snatch away the stocking, so they immediately started fighting without uttering another word. In reality, those players simply reached the destination one after the other. It wasn't an ambush like what Steamed Bun had described it as. "Hey, there's a good man who's willing to give a hand," Steamed Bun called again at that moment. Ye Xiu gave it a thought. It wasn't a good man. They probably came to snatch Wooden Crate's stockings as well. "Bro, we're on the same side." Ye Xiu heard Steamed Bun greet the good man warmly. Even Ye Xiu felt bad for Steamed Bun, but he would never have expected that Steamed Bun's greeting caused the opponent to become at a loss in return. This was because the group was a team from tyrannical ambition. Players from big guilds took up a large proportion of the current level 75 players. Because everyone was randomly assigned to a map, it was possible to encounter players from the same guild. The guilds had previously given instructions to their members that if they ran into players from the same guild, they should work together and aim for a better score as a whole. So when Steamed Bun popped up with, "Bro, we're on the same side," the opponent was extremely confused. They subconsciously replied with an "oh," and then viewed Steamed Bun as part of tyrannical ambition. They immediately brought people forward and shielded Steamed Bun. They even rushed straight to the front before immediately realizing something. They turned around and checked his name. Steamed Bun Invasion. What same side? That was a wolf from Happy. As someone who followed Ye Xiu's Lord Grimm starting from the 10th server, Steamed Bun was viewed as a super permanent member by the big guilds early on. "He's from Happy. Attack!" The team captain reacted at once. Without speaking a second word, he stopped going after Wooden Crate. He turned around and stabbed Steamed Bun Invasion with his sword. "You even fight your own people. So shameless," Steamed Bun yelled. Such an unwavering voice put the few from tyrannical ambition to be at loss. This was because it was possible for a character from the heavenly domain to share the same name. In order to tell apart 2 characters with the same name, apart from looking at things like their class or equipment, the most reliable way was to check the character's ID number. Every character had a unique number. Like their personal ID, the character's ID would never be the same. They had never heard of such a strange name like Steamed Bun Invasion before, let alone someone from their own guild. However, Steamed Bun's confident voice managed to cause the few players from tyrannical ambition to freeze for a few seconds. After that, they soon came back to their senses. "Nonsense! We don't have any Steamed Bun Invasions in our guild. Attack!" Boom! They were the ones who called for an attack, but it was them who were attacked first. When they were about to leap towards Steamed Bun Invasion, a cannonball was fired at them. Steamed Bun Invasion didn't have a scratch on him, and the players of tyrannical ambition were sent flying back by the explosion's blast. Ye Xiu's Lord Grimm had finally arrived. "Lord Grimm!" The players of tyrannical ambition cried with despair. The name Lord Grimm wasn't rare, but Ye Xiu's Lord Grimm was too easy to recognize. They didn't even need to check the character's information to see if he was unspecialized. Judging by the character's brightly colored appearance, there couldn't be another one in the heavenly domain. "Retreat!" The team captain showed his resolution. Seeing that a Lord Grimm had arrived, he took the lead and ran without wanting Wooden Crate stockings. "You want to run after seeing my boss? What a shameless guy!" Steamed Bun's brick flew ahead, and the team captain successfully dodged it as he ran, without understanding how steamed Bun's words worked. Everyone was an enemy, so it wasn't rare to have someone spurting foul language, but there was no reason to call him a shameless guy. He didn't even have the chance to be shameless. Steamed Bun, don't chase them. Ye Xiu called for Steamed Bun to stop. Wooden Crate's 5-player team didn't want to fight at all, so when Ye Xiu turned his view around, they had already taken this gap as opportunity and escaped quite far away. Quickly chase here. Ye Xiu called for Steamed Bun. Hurry. It was unknown whom Steamed Bun was calling for. Did you see them trade? Ye Xiu asked. Steamed Bun asked with a single word. Ye Xiu firmly shut up. Steamed Bun wouldn't have noticed such a detail. They were in a team battle, so the ranking was listed with teams as units. The system announced who picked up the stocking, but if it was traded within the team, the system wouldn't be announced to the public. The ranking list would only show that their team had a pair of stockings, so it was hard to tell whether the stockings were on Wooden Crate, who had first picked it up. This friend team didn't have any important figures, but they had a brain. When Ye Xiu looked, the other side had split up. He immediately realized that the stocking might have been traded to someone else. The stockings might not be on Wooden Crate anymore. You follow Wooden Crate closely, I'll pursue the others. Ye Xiu quickly organized. He thought that the opponent could have purposely placed the decoys, so the stocking might still be on Wooden Crate all along. Wooden Crate's luck was pretty good. He was the first to pick up the stocking in this map, and had picked up the item Invisible Cloak before that. After picking up the stockings, appearing in the announcement, and encountering Steamed Bun, Wooden Crate decisively used the Invisible Cloak. Soon afterwards, his friends arrived. In addition, the players who came were no longer just Steamed Bun alone. Normal players weren't tyrannical enough to be pressed forward fearlessly and slay anything that blocked their path. All they thought about was how to keep their pair of stockings, so when they were given the chance, they immediately fled. The 5 players scattered in 5 different directions. After all, they wouldn't lose any experience or equipment when they died, so naturally, everyone was willing to sacrifice themselves. Which character had the stocking? Even someone rich with experience like Ye Xiu couldn't guess the answer to this problem. As a result, he let Steamed Bun continue to watch Wooden Crate closely, while he made the easiest decision: pursue the one closest to him. The closest one was a berserker. Ye Xiu's Lord Grim attacked while moving forward, which didn't affect his accuracy in the slightest. The berserker player's skills was a lot rougher, so when he heard the cannon behind him, the character jumped without looking back. This was a thoughtless and subconscious action made by normal players because they felt the need to do something. Due to this jump, along with the air blast created by the explosion, the berserker player shocked himself. "Ho, I can fly this high." After that, he originally wanted to quick recover when he landed, but he didn't succeed. He was only able to complete a half roll. He landed in a crooked way, burying his head beneath a pile of snow. Ye Xiu's Lord Grim arrived in front of him in the blink of an eye. "Don't chase me, the stockings aren't with me." The player saw that he couldn't fight with strength, so he immediately used words. "Oh, then who is it with?" Ye Xiu asked. "I don't know, he didn't trade with me." This person spoke, and a sword light suddenly shot up from under the snow. This sneak attack was rather sudden and abrupt. However, Lord Grim's myriad manifestations umbrella was even quicker. When it was swung, it changed into its spear form, and the dragon fang managed to stun the berserker. This player only managed to clearly see with astonishment the name of the person before him at this moment. Lord Grim was the last to arrive. During that time, his team was already escaping, so no one paid too much attention. "Lord Grim," this person blurted out. Lord Grim was more well-known than Steamed Bun Invasion. "It's me." Ye Xiu replied without stopping. He needed to seize the moment and deal with the opponent to check if he had the stocking. "I've watched your matches. You're amazing." The opponent called out. "Is that so? Which match did you see?" Ye Xiu asked casually. "The match with Everlasting." "Really? Why didn't I see you?" Ye Xiu asked. This person was speechless for a moment. This was because one could watch the Challenger League by squeezing into the arena's room. The names of the audience would be listed, so if someone came to watch, their name could be seen. This person couldn't come up with an answer in time, so he obviously hadn't watched it, which was why he was so lacking in confidence. Ye Xiu laughed, but he didn't mind. Whether he watched it or not wouldn't stop him from continuing to kill him. Stockings. The most important thing was stockings. The berserker obviously couldn't rival Ye Xiu, so he was dealt with in less than a minute. Ye Xiu took a look. His luck wasn't good. He didn't drop any stockings. No wonder this person was so talkative. He might have been wanting to divert Ye Xiu's focus to drag the time. Ye Xiu spun Lord Grimm's view around to look. The other players couldn't be found. Their viewing distance was quite bad in this windy and snowy map. Steamed Bun, have you caught up to him? Ye Xiu could only continue the "I can't" hear because the wind's too strong, so I must speak louder conversation. I've caught up, I'm fixing him up right now, Steamed Bun replied. Position. Ye Xiu didn't have any target on his side, so he decided to support Steamed Bun. The King's Avatar Chapter 898. Steamed Bun was more than skilled enough to handle normal players. When Ye Xiu's Lord Grimm arrived, Ye Xiu didn't see anyone named Wooden Crate. Where did he go? Ye Xiu asked. I killed him. Steamed Bun had Steamed Bun Invasion wave his fists around. Stocking. Ye Xiu was about to ask, but he realized that Steamed Bun definitely didn't have it. If not, the system would have announced that Steamed Bun had picked up a stocking. It looks like the stocking is with the other three, Ye Xiu said. At the same time, he checked the current totals. Only this stocking had been found so far, and it was in the possession of Wooden Crate's team. When you ran into them last time, was there an ambush waiting? It was only until now that Ye Xiu had an opportunity to ask this question. When he heard Steamed Bun's description, he immediately knew that this ambush was just Steamed Bun's understanding of the situation. Come over here. Ye Xiu's Lord Grimm figured out which direction to head towards and started moving. Are we going to continue splitting up? Steamed Bun Invasion was eager to go in the opposite direction. We'll stick together for now. Ye Xiu called after him. From the way they do things, this team is rather cautious. They're very attentive towards their coordination with one another. Even though they split up, they weren't far from each other, so if something happened, the other four could quickly arrive to rescue him. We just killed 2 of them. They'll certainly choose to revive. The other 3 will probably head towards the revival point to continue to provide support, and then continue helping each other out. Ye Xiu didn't know whether Steamed Bun would understand what he said or not, but he still explained his reasoning in detail. He hoped Steamed Bun could be more normal and think more logically. How insightful. You really deserve to be called the boss. Let's go. Steamed Bun expressed his respect towards Ye Xiu, and immediately had Steamed Bun Invasion chase after Lord Grimm. Every map only had 1 revival point. Ye Xiu and Steamed Bun were more skilled and had better equipment than normal players, so they moved quite a bit faster. Not long after hurrying in this direction, they saw 3 figures heading towards the revival point in the snowstorm. That's probably them. Hurry! They were a bit far, so Ye Xiu couldn't clearly see their names. After calling out to Steamed Bun, he consumed more stamina to close in quickly on them until he could confirm their names. Stay low. Ye Xiu was afraid Steamed Bun would greet them again, so he hastily warned him. "Chem, we can't let them run away again," Ye Xiu said. Yes, the 2 quietly and quickly crept up on the 3 players. The noise from the heavy snowstorm concealed the noise of their footsteps. The 3 were unaware of any enemies nearby and continued forward. You take the one on the right, I'll take the other 2. Ye Xiu said once they were close enough. Steamed Bun wasn't the only one who heard him. The 3 players ahead jumped in fright. By the time they turned around, Lord Grimm and Steamed Bun Invasion had already started attacking them. The 3 clearly didn't want to fight. They tried their usual tactic and split up to escape. This time, Ye Xiu was ready and had launched a sneak attack at such a close distance. He wasn't going to give them a chance to escape again. If running away wasn't an option, then fighting back was the only option they could choose. There were no penalties for dying, so it freed them of many worries, but even with a different mentality, normal players couldn't suddenly become pro-level players. The three planned on putting their all into the fight, but by the time they set their hearts and steeled their resolves, their characters were already on the ground. From then on, they were unable to get back up all the way until they died. In the end, Ye Xiu didn't know which character had dropped the stocking. Good. Once Ye Xiu picked up the stocking, the system announcement came out. Ye Xiu and Steamed Bun once again had no targets in sight. The progress was going so slowly. Perhaps it was because of the nasty weather that affected everyone's ability to search for stockings. The others in Happy had started the event at around the same time as Ye Xiu and Steamed Bun. At the moment, their maps were all bustling with activity. In the other maps, at least 5 stockings had already been found. None of them were like Ye Xiu's situation. Just when Ye Xiu was grumbling about it, a system announcement came out. The player Orange Jasmine had picked up a stocking. From the name, Orange Jasmine seemed to be a player from Herb Garden. In reality, not all Herb Garden players had herb names, and not all players with herb names were tiny herb fans. This Orange Jasmine wasn't an Herb Garden player. He was part of a team with his friends, similar to Wooden Crate's team. As soon as he picked up this stocking, he started to panic because last time the system announcement came, quite a few players inside the map knew Lord Grimm was here too. Lord Grimm had just stolen a stocking too. Orange Jasmine, let's look for him. As a result, Ye Xiu and Steamed Bun once again split up and searched all over the map. This time, Ye Xiu was the one to find the target. The entire team was together. Ye Xiu didn't know if they had traded the stocking to someone else, so he didn't act rashly. He stealthily lied in wait nearby and then called for Steamed Bun to come over. In just that brief amount of time, the 3rd and 4th stockings had been found. Ye Xiu could only note down their names for the time being. Steamed Bun rushed over Ye quite swiftly, but this time, beating their opponents wouldn't be as easy. Ye Xiu gave Steamed Bun 2 targets while he took 3. Once an opportunity arrived, they pounced. The opposing 5 players reacted quickly and immediately engaged in battle, but as soon as Ye Xiu saw them fall into formation, he immediately saw that they were defending a single target. Orange Jasmine. They were protecting the player who had picked up a stocking. As a result, Ye Xiu's Lord Grimm charged decisively towards Orange Jasmine. Orange Jasmine was a sharpshooter. He immediately attacked while moving backwards with aerial fire. The other 4 in his team prepared to stop Lord Grimm, but with their pitiful skill level, how could they hope to block Ye Xiu? Even less likely with Steamed Bun assisting him. Orange Jasmine saw that the situation wasn't looking good and aerial fired away. Ye Xiu's Lord Grimm didn't chase after him. With a shadow clone technique, his real body suddenly flickered to the enemy team's paladin. Lord Grimm caught the paladin completely unprepared and struck the paladin down. The other 3 impatiently rushed over even more zealously than when they had protected Orange Jasmine. At this moment, Orange Jasmine suddenly stopped. As soon as he saw that the situation had changed, he immediately ran back. The stocking clearly wasn't on Orange Jasmine, but rather this team's paladin. Who was Ye Xiu? He was a god of glory with top-notch awareness, tactical skills, and experience. After a quick exchange, he quickly saw through the other side's strategy. They were using Orange Jasmine was bait. Their true target of protection was this paladin. Reality confirmed Ye Xiu's deduction. After telling Steamed Bun to ignore the other 4 and focus on beating up this paladin, this healing class soon fell. As expected, the stocking dropped. He quickly picked it up. Lord Grimm was once again announced by the system. Lord Grimm's strength was terrifying, but in this map, dying didn't incur any penalties. The remaining 4 did not have any stockings and did not need to be protected. They had nothing to lose, so they decided to surround Ye Xiu and try to fight him to the death. To the next one. Once Ye Xiu picked up that stocking, he didn't plan on tangling with them and ran. Lord Grimm flew backwards with aerial fire. Steamed bun invasion accompanied him and the two quickly vanished into the snowstorm. The 4 players were furious, but they were powerless to do anything. Third, fourth, fifth pair. Lord Grimm kept on appearing on TV. Every time he went on TV, the number of stockings wouldn't change, but the number of stockings every other team had would decrease. Ye Xiu and Steamed Bun didn't know what type of luck they had. They had yet to find a single stocking, but they managed to find all of the players that had found a stocking and scooped up the whole lot. These 2 had undoubtedly offended those 5. Normally, Lord Grimm's fame was beyond them. Normal players didn't dare to challenge him, but just like Orange Jasmine's party, they didn't have any stockings and wouldn't receive any penalties for dying, so why should they be scared of Lord Grimm? Who cared if they lived or died? Might as well try. If they actually killed him, then that was 5 stockings collected in one go. As a result, to these fearless players, Lord Grimm was not seen as the suspected god Ye Xiu, but rather a moving stocking. Everyone wanted to try and take it. Ye Xiu didn't fear these normal players, but there was no need to waste time fighting them, so he tried to evade them. During this time, stockings spawned and stockings were picked up. The players who picked up the stocking had their misgivings. They didn't dare to provoke an expert like Lord Grimm, but even if they weren't going to provoke Lord Grimm, Ye Xiu wasn't going to let them go. When a total of 15 stockings had spawned, 12 stockings had been picked up. Of these 12, Ye Xiu and Steamed Bun had 9. They hadn't found any of these but stolen them all from others. At this moment they flagged down a team. Tyrannical Ambition's team saw Lord Grimm and tried to go around, but they were still caught. I feel like, whether it's finding a player or a team, it's easier than finding a pair of stockings. Ye Xiu sighed and acted. In the eyes of normal players, this team consisted of experts from a powerful guild, but in front of Ye Xiu and Steamed Bun, they were no different from the other mediocre teams made up of friends. In the end, of the 5 players, 3 died and 2 escaped. The stocking just happened to be on one of the 3 who had died. Lord Grimm and Steamed Bun Invasion took their 10th stocking, half of all the possible stockings. But in the eyes of others in Team Happy, such a dazzling achievement was being mocked. You 2 still aren't done yet. Wei Chen and his team were the first to finish a round of the event. In the end, they took 18 stockings for themselves, a complete sweep. Following afterwards, he delightedly went over to laugh at Ye Xiu. The King's Avatar Chapter 899 Nice. Ye Xiu replied casually. He didn't have the time to bother with Wei Chen's provocation. Even if he was currently fighting against normal players, these normal players had no fear. They were exceptionally brave and fierce towards this stocking present bag. Ye Xiu needed to be careful too. He had thought of transferring over his stockings, but seeing that his partner Steamed Bun, Ye Xiu got rid of that thought. It was best if the stockings were kept in his possession. In this situation, even Ye Xiu found it a challenge. It was no surprise the records on the individual rankings were so low. There were only 20 pairs. Even if these pairs were evenly distributed with 1 stocking to 1 player, there would still be 30 fearless barefoot players. For the team rankings, the combined total stockings of the entire team was counted. The stockings could be rotated around between the 5 members, giving the team numerous strategic options. However, for an individual, the individual could only rely on himself to carry all the stockings. If the individual was surrounded and killed, all of his efforts from before would instantly go to waste. From this, it could be seen that the 3 individuals participating in the event Tang Ru, Wu Chen, and Mo Fan didn't have it easy either. Their skill surpassed that of normal players by a huge margin, so once they acquired a bunch of stockings in the initial stages, they were in the same predicament as Ye Xiu. They had become stocking present bags. Anywhere they went, players would attack them. Wei Chen went around in a circle, observing everyone. He discovered that the others were also in a difficult situation. He completely ignored the troubles of an individual participant and laughed loudly. You'd better protect them well. If you die at the end, the situation will instantly turn around, Wei Chen said. He reached a conclusion relying on his experience and intuition, and instantly grasped the main point of this event. The system would update the scoreboards with the number of stockings possessed by each party. Because of how the event worked, more than half of the players would not have any stockings by the end. Going full force for stockings in the beginning definitely wasn't a wise choice to make. If you stood out among the crowd flying against the wind, still wanting to soar through the skies was too difficult. Just as Wei Chen gave his advice, he heard Tang Ru cry out in surprise. "What's wrong? What's wrong?" Wei Chen immediately rushed over to check. Afterwards, he held a face filled with pity and sympathy. "See, you weren't careful and died. You've got to stay low profile," Soft Mist, who had 6 stockings, died. Much of it had to do with Tang Ru's personality. She didn't like hiding, so if she ever saw someone, she would fight. After several fights, Tang Ru couldn't guarantee that her character took no damage. Right when she was recovering after killing a few players, someone ambushed her. In a panic, Tang Ru made a few mistakes. The several players who she had just killed revived and allied together to kill her. Then from her ghost view, Tang Ru saw those guys looting her dropped stockings. Helpless, she could only choose to revive. What a pity. Wei Chen shook his head and sighed. Then he went to take a look at Mo Fan's side. Wei Chen didn't have a good impression of this cold and detached guy, so he hadn't paid much attention to his side previously. When he took a look, this guy was actually having quite an easy time. He carried 7 stockings on him and was still searching the map for targets. Every time he bumped into an enemy, he was always able to escape. A true professional. After watching for a while, Wei Chen couldn't help but sigh. Mo Fan was worthy of someone who had once been a top-tier scrap picker. He was just too professional with this task. It was as if this quest was made for him, like a fish in water. Wei Chen stopped watching Mo Fan and went to take a look at Wu Chen's side. When he glanced over, he suddenly went into a daze. Then he gave Wu Chen a big thumbs up and sighed with unfeigned emotion. "Bro, how decisive of you." All 20 stockings had spawned on Wu Chen's map. When Wei Chen took a look, the players had found a total of 15 stockings so far. Of those, Wu Chen's Dawn rifle possessed 6 stockings. He was currently being chased crazily as a target by those guys without any stockings. When Wei Chen went around in a circle and returned, on the live updated scoreboard, the number of stockings picked up by players had actually decreased to 11. When he took a look at Wu Chen's Dawn rifle, his 6 stockings had actually become only 2. Wei Chen stared blankly. He suddenly understood that perhaps when he had become everyone's target, he threw down 4 stockings of his own accord, so among those with stockings, he no longer stood out. With this mighty decision-making, who would be so stupid as to pick a fight with him? "Advance by retreating, you really do have some skill," Wei Chen praised. Wu Chen obviously wasn't satisfied with 2 stockings. He simply got rid of his awkward status as a present bag for now, allowing the opponents take the initiative and then strike when the time was right. Daring to relinquish already acquired stockings was rather courageous. "Look at him. You should learn a bit." Wei Chen admired Wu Chen's strategy and then turned to look at Ye Xiu's side. But when he took a look, he was astonished. "Wow, you respond fast. You've actually thrown a bunch away already. Child, you show promise." Ye Xiu was even more thorough. He had decided to throw away all 10 of his stockings. Right now, his team had 0 stockings. The number of stockings possessed by players became 2. The progress was so slow that Wei Chen wanted to cry. Wei Chen continued to walk around and observe the others. When he glanced at Steamed Bun's screen, he exclaimed in surprise, "FCK, you're so despicable." Steamed Bun Invasion was hiding in a pile of snow. His gaze was locked onto a single spot. That place had no one there, just a bunch of stockings. 10 stockings to be exact. Ye Xiu had thrown all 10 of his stockings, but he had sent Steamed Bun to guard them. Wei Chen's remark wasn't aimed at Steamed Bun, but Ye Xiu. He was certain that Ye Xiu had set this arrangement up. "Bun, you can't keep on staring at these stockings. Pay attention to your surroundings." Wei Chen reminded Steamed Bun. "Boss told me to stare at them like this." Steamed Bun didn't move a single inch. Ye Xiu confirmed it. "You're doing beautifully, Steamed Bun." Of course, Steamed Bun was delighted. At this moment, several players appeared in Steamed Bun's line of sight. They came through the snowstorm. The closer they came, the clearer Steamed Bun could see them. "People are coming. Hurry up and move the stockings." Wei Chen hastily warned Steamed Bun. This guy was just sitting there as if he were asleep. He didn't budge and just kept staring at the stockings. In the end, Steamed Bun didn't move. "Hey," Wei Chen pushed Steamed Bun. "Stop bothering me." Steamed Bun glared at Wei Chen in condemnation. "They're almost there. Why are you still sitting there doing nothing?" Wei Chen shouted. "You're so annoying, go lead your team," Ye Xiu spoke out. During that exchange of words, that team approached and suddenly discovered a pile of stockings laying there. They were clearly overjoyed at the turn of events and dashed over. Steamed Bun kept still. He quietly watched as those guys snatched up all 10 stockings in one swoop and began discussing with each other. "What's going on? Mutual destruction. It must be. Haha, lucky us. How amazing." When they picked them up one after the other, the system announced their team name over and over again. The team immediately left after picking up the stockings. Steamed Bun finally moved, maintaining a distance from them, slowly following them. After Wei Chen stared blankly for a while, he finally understood Ye Xiu's intent. Wu Chen had simply given up on a few of his stockings temporarily, but for Ye Xiu, Wei Chen thought that he had thrown them all out and then left Steamed Bun there to guard them. Now he knew that Steamed Bun wasn't guarding them. He intentionally let someone else carry the bomb for them and had Steamed Bun follow them closely. When the time came, a Siskin would swoop by and take all of the stockings all at once. Compared to Wu Chen's strategy, Ye Xiu's strategy was much more proactive. Shameless, despicable, immoral. Wei Chen rushed over to denounce Ye Xiu. "Shut up!" Ye Xiu dismissed him. Everything developed just as Ye Xiu had expected. The team that took 10 stockings instantly became everyone's target and was chased by everyone else. The stockings circled around several times. No matter who took the stockings, Steamed Bun Invasion was always nearby, following them like a ghost. As for Ye Xiu, he roamed around killing people. One stocking after the other came into his hands. Then, these stockings would always miraculously appear nearby whichever team held the most stockings. Thus, that team would have more and more stockings. Of the 20 stockings, 19 had been picked up. Among those 19, one team had 16 stockings, causing all the other teams to howl and search crazily for the location of that one team. That team was scared too. They somehow managed to find 16 stockings. They felt like they were dreaming. Once another stocking was picked up, the countdown would begin for the quest to end. Darkness came before dawn. It was always hard to endure. It wasn't easy for them to last this long. Now that the final stretch had come, they had to make a gamble. The team gathered together and after a serious discussion, they handed all 16 stockings to a single player and then scattered. When a character completed a trade, there would be a movement from the character indicating it. Ye Xiu had told Steamed Bun that he must identify who completed the trade. Steamed Bun didn't betray Ye Xiu's hopes. Hiding nearby, he clearly saw who among the 5 he needed to follow. He didn't need instructions for that. Steamed Bun locked onto the one carrying all 16 stockings and reported back to Ye Xiu. "Ah, so that's what they ended up doing. That makes things easier for us. Go ahead and attack," Ye Xiu said. Steamed Bun, who had been in hiding for so long, finally erupted. He suddenly rushed out from the snow. Along with the falling snowflakes, he charged towards that stocking present bag, determined and decisive. That player didn't think that the lucky them would end up with such bad luck in the final stretch. As soon as they scattered, he was found by someone. Steamed Bun didn't know if that player had asked for help. He only knew that his target was very easy to deal with. He easily killed him off. A tidal wave of announcements poured out from the system. Steamed Bun Invasion's name appeared again and again. That old target disappeared, and what replaced that target was a team with 19 stockings now. Ye Xiu and Steamed Bun were originally in the lead, but then they had accidentally slipped up. Afterwards, they were extremely unlucky for a long time, not encountering the fat present bag, leading to Lord Grimm's team only holding 3 stockings, but in the very last stretch, they instantly snatched away the fat present bag. "No one pick up that last stocking," someone shouted in the map's public chat. The first to reply to him was Lord Grimm, who replied, "Ha ha." Then Ye Xiu lit his cigarette and clicked his mouse, picking up the final stocking right next to Lord Grimm. System announcement. Player Lord Grimm has picked up the 20th stocking. If no change occurs within the next 120 seconds, the quest will end. The King's Avatar Chapter 900. How many stockings did you guys get again? With a cigarette in his mouth, Ye Xiu turned his head and asked Wei Chen amicably. Wei Chen's expression was rather twisted. 18 stockings had been their record. When he saw Ye Xiu and Steamed Bun in a predicament earlier, he repeatedly blabbed about his achievement to Ye Xiu. 18 stockings was shocking enough to most. The current team in the lead on the rankings only had 31 stockings total, which had been acquired over the course of 3 events. But now, Ye Xiu and Steamed Bun had taken all 20 stockings for themselves. Hearing Ye Xiu's question, Wei Chen was certain that if he was in that map, he would definitely sell out Lord Grimm's position. "Don't be so happy, it's not over yet," Wei Chen said. "You don't think I'll be able to last for 120 seconds? Ye Xiu smirked. Wei Chen was unable to respond. With Ye Xiu's skill level, surviving for 2 minutes wouldn't be a problem. Even though the other players were searching frantically for Lord Grimm and Steamed Bun Invasion, everyone was spread out. It wasn't 2 people fighting against 40 all at once. In this situation, so what if they managed to encounter Lord Grimm or Steamed Bun Invasion? Steamed Bun position. Ye Xiu was much more worried about Steamed Bun. For the previous task, Steamed Bun had beautifully completed it, but there was still 120 seconds to go. Hopefully, nothing would happen to him. After getting Steamed Bun's current position, Ye Xiu took a look at the distance between them. It would take some time before he could reach him. Lord Grimm immediately flung open his myriad manifestations umbrella. He utilized Gatling gun and shot his gun crazily. There were no players inside Lord Grimm's field of view, but the loud gunshots from his Gatling gun couldn't be masked by the snowstorm. At this moment, apart from Lord Grimm or Steamed Bun Invasion, who else would be fighting? As a result, the noise quickly attracted the attention of all surrounding players. Ye Xiu hoped that normal players wouldn't be good enough to deduce his position, so after Gatling gun went on cooldown, he flipped through his skill list and chose skills that produced extremely loud noises. Finally, a player appeared in his field of view. Lord Grimm took the initiative to welcome him. "Over here." The instant that player saw Lord Grimm, besides being excited, he immediately called over his teammates. But he soon realized that against Lord Grimm, would their team of 5 be an opponent? 5 against 1. Under normal circumstances, it was an infallible advantage, but Lord Grimm as the opponent definitely couldn't be considered a normal situation. The team of 5 discussed for a moment. In the end, the excitement didn't go over their heads. They decisively reported Lord Grimm's location in the public chat. The 120-second timer displayed by the system continued to count down. Unable to find the target, the players were going crazy. When they saw someone suddenly giving out Lord Grimm's location, without thinking too much about it, they hurried over to that location. "Steamed bun, make sure you hide well," Ye Xiu yelled. Even though he had attracted everyone's attention, he couldn't guarantee that no one would encounter steamed bun invasion as they made their way over. Steamed bun was no longer only staring in a single direction. He was constantly looking around for any signs of movements. After tailing someone for so long, he was quite used to this map and knew how to use it to his advantage. He had grasped the distance needed to see someone's figure, and the distance needed to see someone's name clearly. In this kind of situation, when everyone was single-mindedly focused on reaching Lord Grimm, it was very easy for him to hide. Everyone was in a hurry. When they saw a figure far, far away, they might not consider taking a closer look to see who it was. Staying safe for Steamed Bun was practically ensured. As for Ye Xiu's side, all of the players were rushing enthusiastically in his direction. They weren't coordinating with each other, so the encirclement wouldn't be very precise. He easily found an opening and led the players away from Steamed Bun Invasion's location. More and more players appeared behind Lord Grimm. The countdown continued to tick. If they only chased, the problem wouldn't be solved. They needed to intercept him to restrict his movements. The players predicted Lord Grimm's movements and began cutting across diagonally and circling around to the front. But could 3 or 5 players blocking be much of an obstacle for Ye Xiu? Ye Xiu didn't even bother fighting them and directly blew past them. When the countdown hit 0, the characters stopped receiving commands from the players and stood still. The system announced the final results. At the same time, a system announcement appeared in the heavenly domain. "Congratulations to Lord Grimm and Steamed Bun Invasion for achieving a grand slam in the Christmas event. We're on the TV." Steamed Bun was excited. Ye Xiu didn't know that this hidden mechanism existed. After all, ever since the event began, no team had ever managed to acquire all 20 stockings in a round. A grand slam wasn't easy. Seeing a customized announcement by the system, Ye Xiu felt like there should be a reward for it. When Ye Xiu clicked on the Christmas envoy next to the map exit, sure enough, a grand slam came with rewards. Unlike how stockings could only be accepted at the end of the event, these rewards could be received now. Ye Xiu clicked confirm. Following after, a system announcement appeared again. Player Lord Grimm has achieved a grand slam in the Christmas event and has been rewarded. Apocalypse Star. Everyone impatiently checked the reward. A pleasing orange necklace appeared. Apart from the basic magic resistance, this necklace did not increase any of the 4 main stats. However, it increased stunning physical attack and magic attack by a stunning 10%. As a game that paid particular attention to combat, players valued attack extremely highly. An item that increased attack was always welcome. Plus 10% physical and magic attack was absolutely huge. Thus, apart from these 2 bonuses, there were no other attributes. From this, it could be seen just how incredible these 2 bonuses were. Who knew how many people were drooling seeing this necklace? Ye Xiu also nodded his head in approval. This is quite good. After saying that, he equipped it. The increased stats could be seen at a glance. Steamed Bun also accepted his reward. Just after Lord Grimm appeared on TV, Steamed Bun Invasion's name followed. Who knew if his reward was a coincidence, but it seemed to be related to Lord Grimm's reward. Lord Grimm's reward was Apocalypse Star. Steamed Bun Invasion's reward was called Sundering Apocalypse. Everyone naturally went to take a look at it. It once again brought a storm of envy from a portion of players. Sunder Apocalypse was a claw, the most popular weapon among brawlers. Sundering Apocalypse. Level 75 Claw. Weight 2.2, Durability 22, Attack Speed 5, Physical Attack 771, Magic Attack 767, Strength plus 40, Intelligence plus 31, Weapon Attack plus 10%, Attack Effects plus 5%, Attack Speed plus 3, Street Riot Skill Level plus 2 attacks have a 5% chance of inflicting bleed on the target lasting 10 seconds. The weapon stats were also exceptionally powerful. It didn't specify physical or magic attack, which meant it increased both. However, there was a difference between weapon attack plus 10% and Apocalypse Stars, physical attack plus 10%. Weapon attack 10% meant that it only increased the equipment's attack. In other words, it would only increase Sundering Apocalypse's 771 physical attack and 767 magic attack by 10%. On the other hand, Apocalypse Stars, physical attack plus 10%, meant the character's overall physical attack stat would be increased. A character's stat was based on the character's base stats as well as all other equipment equipped. Thus, from this perspective, Apocalypse Stars' physical and magic attack plus 10% was much more valuable than weapon attack plus 10%. That wasn't Sundering Apocalypse's only stat bonus, though. Attack effects plus 5% was another very powerful bonus. This description indicated that all effects from attacks would be increased. Brawlers had many skills that inflicted statuses such as dizzy, bleed, poison, etc. The all-around buff by attack effects plus 5% didn't need to be mentioned. In addition, attack speed plus 3 was a top-tier bonus stat for classes that didn't cast spells. Street Riot was the new level 75 brawler skill. The current evaluation of it was that it was a lazy attempt at a skill because all it did was increase the power of low and mid-level brawler skills, but in actual combat, its might was worthy of a level 75 skill. And then the 10-second bleed. That might not be considered too powerful, but it couldn't be ignored. It was a very annoying effect and was a boon to the player's DPS. When these two pieces of equipment appeared, countless players coveted them. Some even asked if they were willing to sell them in the global chat. There were many players who didn't lack money. Ye Xiu and Steamed Bun obviously ignored these requests. After Ye Xiu had Lord Grim equip Apocalypse Star, he stood up and walked around in a circle just like when Wei Chen had finished his first round of the event. Tang Ru, Wu Chen, and Mo Fan's first round had ended as well. Among the three, Mo Fan did the best. He obtained 11 stockings alone. Next was Wu Chen, who picked up 9. However, part of that was because Wu Chen had switched strategies a bit too late. If he had followed this clear strategy from the beginning, he might have done better. As for Tang Ru, because of a big death in the middle, she only ended up getting 6 stockings before her map ended. In this first round for Happy, Ye Xiu and Steamed Bun did the best. Wei Chen's team nearly got a grand slam. As for the other three, for an individual, Mo Fan and Wu Chen did quite well. But after this first wave, everyone at least understood something. Standing out was no good.